Chapter 12:17. It hadn't been a long time since he last came to Luoyang City. This bustling city hadn't changed at all because of his visit. The only difference was that there were no longer posters with his handsome face hanging on the streets and alleys. Instead, there were posters of other people, such as Gillette's razor or someone's new movie or play. What Guang had done in the past had indeed turned the bustling Luoyang City upside down for a period of time, but time and the city had worked together to erase the deepest traces. The only thing that reminded Guang of the time, when he came to Luoyang City with women, was probably the poster of Emma Watson. After acting in Romeo and Juliet with Guang, little Watson's acting skills seemed to have improved out of thin air. She was now more and more famous in the European and American drama industry. From a rising star in a small circle, she had now become the face of a drama. She deserved it. Guang was never stingy with his generosity. He was also willing to let those who were willing to help him benefit from it, whether it was intentional or not. Unfortunately, he did not have much time now. Otherwise, Guang would have liked to see Emma Watson's performance. But he decided not to do so now. Guang, who had disguised himself as a middle-aged man, did not have to worry about being recognized at all. However, he still habitually guarded against the surveillance cameras on the street. No one would believe it, but there were fewer surveillance cameras on the streets of Luoyang City than in Wujing City. It was quite easy for Guang to avoid them. No wonder the crime rate in America was so high. But it was not as if Guang had never encountered something that troubled him. In order to avoid the surveillance cameras, he accidentally walked into an alley. He had only taken a few steps when a few very strong black men jumped out from a small door next to the alley. "Hey, old Asian man, leave your phone and wallet behind and get lost. This is not a place you should be." The black man, standing at the front, was shaking a long dagger in his hand. His waist was bulging, and he was probably carrying other things with him. Bang! Clang! Dong! Dong! 10 seconds later, Guang clapped his hands and left, leaving a few of his buddies moaning on the ground. The dagger was broken into 3 pieces, and the guns they had hidden at their waists were scattered everywhere. Guang whistled and cursed in his heart. Was it because his disguise was too simple and honest? What era was it? How could he still be robbed? Someone actually dares to rob me? Do you really know how to write the word death? Well, they can't write Chinese. Originally, he thought that the Schultz family would be heavily guarded at this time, but after arriving here, he found that was not the case. The huge gate of the manor was filled with cars and people, and the atmosphere was even a little festive. Guang didn't approach him rashly. Instead, he found a cafe nearby, ordered a latte, and sat down. He then asked the waiter to bring him a copy of Hitchcock's suspense stories and pretended to read it. No one noticed that most of Guang's attention was on the people going in and out of the Schultz family's manor. He saw several Asian faces. These people looked quite wretched. They bowed their heads when they walked, as if everyone was their boss. Needless to say, they were people from the Sanshin group. In addition, some people who looked like doctors came out from time to time. They should be the psychiatrists hired by the Schultz family to treat the young Schultz. Guang couldn't help but snicker. "Are you kidding me? You're going to cure the guy that I made crazy? Then Guang, should go home and plant sweet potatoes." After sitting for an hour or so, he got up and left. This was the last time he confirmed his guess. There was no need to hesitate anymore. The Schultz family was indeed involved in this matter. Old Schultz had come out for a short time to see off a well-known brain doctor in the United States. When the doctor left, he was frowning. Obviously, he couldn't do anything about Schultz's condition. Old Schultz didn't get the result he wanted, and he looked gloomy. However, after his secretary came over and said something, Old Schultz smiled as he walked back, as if he had heard something good. 5 minutes later, Guang received an internal notification from Lu Xiaoyang. Lu Xiaoyang had just called to report that America's cinemas had gone crazy and requested for Woman to be removed. Although Women had passed its peak, the drop in the box office was still within a controllable range. The daily box office was still more than 5 million, and the drop was getting slower. Many performing arts students and people who were interested in the art of film became the main consumers. They watched the movie 10 times or even 20 times. Because of this, it was understandable that the screening rate was lowered. However, women could challenge the record of the longest screening period in North America, which was 3 months. This was a historical record for Chinese films. More importantly, the longer the movie stayed in the cinema chain, the more money they could make. Chen Guang didn't reply to the message, but it didn't take long for the inside information to be updated again. It was confirmed that the Schultz family had taken the initiative to contact several companies that controlled the largest cinema chains in North America, hoping that they would stop showing women. In fact, for these cinema chains, it didn't make any difference whether they stopped showing the movie or not. Now that women had passed its peak, it didn't matter who the movie was. If nothing had happened to Chen Guang, these cinema chains might not have been willing to offend him. However, the fact that he was beheaded had almost become an open secret. Since he was already dead, they didn't need to care about his feelings. Chen Guang didn't need to ask anyone else. Combining the two things, he guessed that was what old Schultz's secretary had just told him. He couldn't help but sneer. Did they really think that I was dead? The terrible thing wasn't over yet. After Chen Guang returned to the hotel and had dinner, Zhuo Jingxi, who was in Prince, called him. She said that things had changed again. Although her personal safety wasn't a problem under Ani Mei's protection, Prince's laboratory was obviously disloyal. Many new faces appeared outside the laboratory. Not only that, but Prince's laboratory also changed their previous happy cooperation and began to spy on Zhuo Jingxi's experimental process more wildly and arrogantly. If she hadn't asked people to keep an eye on the laboratory 24 hours a day, Prince would have quietly sneaked in to steal the samples. In the face of a $100 billion market, there was no real morality in this world. In the past, due to Chen Guang's identity and influence, he was extremely powerful both in and outside of Huaxia. Whether it was Prince's laboratory, the major photocatalyst partners, or the cinema chains, they all followed the rules. But now that something had happened to Chen Guang, many of the tricks hidden in the dark had been revealed. Chen Guang felt that it was very likely that Prince's laboratory wasn't just eyeing the samples. In other people's hearts, Teacher Zhuo was the one who had the 5 god-level formulas. Not only that, but she also had knowledge that surpassed the times. Therefore, Prince's real goal should be to keep Teacher Zhuo and put her under house arrest. Behind this matter wasn't just this well-known laboratory. It was impossible to say that without the tacit consent of the people in power in America. Standing in front of the window and watching the slowly setting sun outside, Chen Guang sighed. You guys forced me to do this. Human nature is really terrible. Chapter 12:18. In the past few days, the staff of Tianguang Group had all left Los Angeles for New York. This was an order from Chen Guang. Luoyang City was the base camp of the Schultz family. He could not rule out the possibility that the Schultz family would continue to cause trouble for his company's employees after he died. Therefore, it was better to avoid trouble. Before the dust settled, Chen Guang asked the staff of Tianguang Group to temporarily evacuate Luoyang City. He did not want to give the Schultz family any opportunity. In New York, Tang Xiaokai's network was very wide. He could cover both the legal and illegal forces. The Chinese forces in Chinatown were not weak either, so their safety was more guaranteed. However, what Chen Guang was most worried about now was not the staff of Tianguang Group, but Zhuo Jingxi, who was protected by Ani Mei and several special elites. Although there were plenty of people on the other side, a tall tree attracted the wind. He could only blame the things he had left for Zhuo Jingxi were too eye-catching. He felt that they were insignificant, but in the eyes of others, just 5 photocatalyst formulas were worth a rich oil field. Once this resource was obtained by any technology company, it could even create a trust company comparable to Rockefeller. It would have an absolute global monopoly for at least 20 to 30 years. Who would not be tempted by this kind of resource? Not to mention America, which had always occupied a dominant position in various fields of technology. If it was just a civilian force, Zhuo Jingxi's safety would not be too worried. However, once it involved America's political power, even with Ani Mei's protection, it might not be safe. Teacher Zhuo's life might not be in danger. It was more likely that he would be placed under house arrest. However, Ani Mei and the other special elites would definitely die. I really have to hurry up. With this thought in mind, Chen Guang said goodbye to Inu. He first went to the window and looked down. Then, he quietly snuck out of the hotel room. If a hotel security guard happened to see him go out at this time and then looked at the surveillance, he would find something particularly strange. There was clearly a person walking out, but there was no image in the surveillance at all. This was because Chen Guang had used the flowing light shadow technique he had learned from the realm of Jinwu. He had spread out his internal energy in a special way and arranged it around his body so that the light around him would be refracted at a certain angle. Naturally, there was nothing in the picture taken by the camera at the end of the aisle. However, this move wasn't that bugged. It wasn't true invisibility. Once the light's entry point changed, it wouldn't work. If it encountered a patrol, it would look no different from an ordinary person. The experts of Jianghu in the world of true martial used this trick to deal with the sentries that were located far away from them. The others would look at them from the same position, and their line of sight wouldn't shift. This flowing light-shadow technique was very effective. In modern times, this move was even more useful. Using it to deal with surveillance cameras was like a divine skill tailor-made for them. This was something that Chen Guang had just dug out from his brain. You really couldn't blame him. He had learned too many things. Even a computer would need time to search the hard disk, let alone a human brain. In addition, there was another reason that prompted him to make this decision. Damn, this was actually the 28th floor. From here, it was all smooth tempered glass walls. He couldn't jump or climb. It was a trap. Using the same method, Chen Guang made his way down the fire escape to the ground floor. He even encountered 3 property inspectors along the way, but they were all avoided by him. In the end, Chen Guang stuck to the bottom of a Land Rover and left the hotel through the underground garage. Although he didn't have much experience as a special agent, Chen Guang was still the boss of the Guangdong General Headquarters. Before this trip, he had crammed a lot of knowledge for himself. He had also asked the experts in the bureau for advice. Inu, who was also good at this kind of thing, was with him. As long as he was serious, he could make things foolproof from the beginning. First, everyone thought he was dead. Second, once his whereabouts and news were leaked, it would leave such a signal in the Americans. The high-level officials of Huaxia personally massacred the Americans' wealthy family. It might cause international disputes on a certain level, and it would cause a lot of trouble for the old man. At this time, the Schultz Manor was brightly lit. This was the 3rd consecutive day that the Schultz family had held a cocktail party. At the cocktail party, people exchanged toasts and whispered to each other. Old Mrs. Schultz was holding her husband's hand as they walked around the garden, greeting the guests from time to time. Mrs. Schultz's brows were tightly furrowed. Anyone could see that she was in a bad mood. When the two of them walked to the corner of the garden, an argument finally broke out. Red, why are we wasting time on this meaningless thing at this time? Shouldn't we continue to think of ways to treat Coleman? That's enough. Shut up. Do you think I haven't thought of a way? I see at least 8 doctors and 7 medical experts a day. Everyone is thinking of a way. I've used all my connections to try to contact everyone I can. In the whole world, other than the Huaxia brain and psychiatric experts, maybe only the aliens haven't received my people's calls. But is it useful? Although what you said is the truth, it's only been a month. We can't give up on Coleman so easily. Did I say to give up on him? Then what are you doing? Why are you still holding a cocktail party? I'm taking revenge. What do you mean? That Huaxia man made Coleman like this. Will I let him go so easily? Isn't he already dead? But his family is still alive, and his company is still earning dollars in the United States. If we do nothing, sooner or later, the forces he left behind will become stronger and stronger. The Huaxia people won't let it go. So, I have to destroy them completely and not give them any chance. But what does this have to do with the cocktail party? The Huaxia people have a very complicated background. His death hasn't been completely announced yet, but this is like a buried bomb that can explode at any time. When that happens, what awaits us will be crazy revenge. Crazy revenge? The Huaxia military will send agents to Los Angeles to cause trouble for us? That won't happen. This is the United States. The Huaxia people can't do whatever they want. They have to care about the international impact. Then we don't have to care. But once our people or our family's business leave American soil, we will have to face a terrible threat. So, now I have to bring more people on board. This way, we can confuse others and let the Schultz family form a community of interest with more people. Our real goal isn't to make profits, but to expand our network and turn our former friends into allies. Do you understand? After receiving the video from the dark web, old Schultz started his counterattack. So far, it seemed to be working well. First, he had to drive Chen Guang's forces out of American soil. To make a force no longer a threat, the easiest way was to make them poor. In Schultz's opinion, money was equal to power. There was no such thing as absolute friendship in this world, only absolute interests. As long as Chen Guang's family ran out of money, at least they wouldn't be able to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a bounty like he did. Of course, even if that really happened, Schultz wasn't too afraid. Most of the world's top killers had gone crazy, and the rest of the small fry might not be a threat to the Schultz family. In addition, one of the guests at the banquet was the deputy director of the FBI. Next, the FBI would strengthen their investigation and control of the dark web. They might not be able to catch the hidden website operators, but it would be good to make them more restrained. Old Schultz's counterattack was comprehensive, but he missed one point. He didn't expect that Chen Guang wasn't dead and had come to Los Angeles to take his head. When Chen Guang arrived at the Schultz manor, it was already past 9 at night. The place was still noisy. The older generation was discussing in the conference room, and the younger generation was having a party in the banquet hall of another building. Coleman Schultz's younger brother, Randolph Schultz, was in charge of greeting the guests. He didn't seem to be in a good mood. Many people guessed that he might be secretly happy about his brother's misfortune. After all, it meant that the entire Schultz family's wealth belonged to him. But that wasn't the case. The two brothers were very close, and 30 of the $150 million on the bounty had been contributed by him. Randolph, don't be sad. Your brother will get better. A beautiful supermodel came up and comforted him. Randolph smiled. I hope so. Okay, you guys have fun. I'm going to see my brother. About 20 meters away from the window, under the bushes, Chen Guang was looking at Randolph Schultz with a pair of black eyes. The two brothers were roughly 50 to 60% similar in appearance, so Chen Guang could recognize them with a single glance. Relying on his half-baked lip-reading skills, he barely managed to read Randolph's words. So, Chen Guang decided to secretly follow Randolph Schultz. Chen Guang thought that they would hide the elder Schultz in a very secluded place. He didn't expect Randolph Schultz to come out of the house and go straight to the two-story bungalow next to it. Chen Guang used flowing light and shadow, and when the guard turned his head for a moment, he lightly tapped the ground and leaped onto the balcony. Coincidentally, the floor-to-ceiling window was open, so he slipped into the room and hid behind the curtain. Heavy breathing came from the front. Chen Guang slightly opened the curtain and saw Coleman Schultz, who was tied up with ropes. Ever since he was forced to make a deal with her, this guy had completely gone mad. Wait, what I said is a little ambiguous. Forget it, it doesn't matter. This guy is already a dead man. The door opened, and Chen Guang flashed back behind the curtain again. It was Randolph Schultz who walked into the ward. Chen Guang wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He wanted to hear what Randolph had to say. Brother, I will avenge you. Damn, I'm already dead. Who are you going to take revenge on? We know where Chen Guang's family is. I won't let them go. F***CK. This kid is capable. He has dreams, pursuits, and courage. I also know that the Chinese Chen Guang has a lot of women. I will get them all, and then let them taste the wrath of the Schultz family. Chen Guang couldn't control his urge to grind his teeth. I will make all of Chen Guang's female family members become B. Fine. Master Guang didn't need to wait for him to finish. B, do you think I don't know? I'm a B. I'll kill Bill. His figure flashed, and he appeared behind Randolph Schultz like lightning. Randolph only saw a shadow pass by the corner of his eye, and then he felt a chill on the back of his neck, as if someone had placed an ice cube on his neck. He tried to raise his hand, but it was futile. Then he felt his eyelids getting heavier and his head getting heavier. The world in front of him quickly turned dark. Kid, you are very ambitious, but it's not very realistic. If you want to achieve your dreams, you must first be alive. Randolph heard this voice before he died. Although he had never seen Chen Guang in person, he felt a sense of familiarity. This was not the first time he had watched many videos related to Chen Guang with hatred. But wasn't he already dead? I know what you're thinking, but it's meaningless. I hope you'll be a good person in your next life. Goodbye. His hand that was holding the back of Randolph's neck shook slightly, and 5 extremely destructive internal forces gushed out of his 5 fingers and blasted into Randolph Schultz's body. Therefore, many things in this world were made up of countless coincidences. Even if Randolph really hated Chen Guang to the core, if he hadn't coincidentally decided to take a look at Coleman's room at this time and said his innermost thoughts when he thought there was no one else around, Chen Guang might not have taken his life. 5 minutes later, Chen Guang left the house and returned to the manor. The meeting outside was still going on, and the hall where old Schultz and the others held the meeting was still brightly lit. Chen Guang leaned against the window of the meeting hall and listened for a while. A cold expression appeared on his face. All right, only old Schultz, his wife, and the people from Sanshin Group were left inside. They were currently discussing how to deal a deeper blow to Tianguang Group and Chengwang Environmental Protection, which had their roots in China. They even expanded the scope of their attack to Tang Zhao's foundation. In addition, Sanshin Group was also certain that Zhuo Jingxi would not be able to return to China. Their plan was very good, but unfortunately, they had met Chen Guang. Early the next morning, a shocking piece of news suddenly exploded around the world. The first director and general manager of Sanshin Group, as well as the head of the Schultz family, who held a high position in the global aviation industry, had mysteriously died. There were no signs of fighting at the scene, and there were no wounds on the bodies of the dead. They were not poisoned, and there was no suffocation. No one knew what exactly happened, but these people had died silently in the Schultz manor. It was like a curse from hell, and it sent chills down everyone's spine. As for Chen Guang, he had already changed his name to Zhong Jun and boarded a plane to Japan's capital. Chapter 1219. Wasida's team wanted to obtain the photocatalyst technology, but they were rejected by Chen Guang. Furthermore, they were completely excluded. Chen Guang thought this was just a normal business decision. He didn't expect them to be so crazy. Photocatalysis was just one of their many research directions. Perhaps they had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this field, but the competition in scientific research had always been the winner takes all. Unless they could get the sympathy of the winner and were willing to cooperate with each other to share part of the technology, the loser would often lose everything. But even so, there were countless scientific research institutions in the world competing in the same or similar projects all the time, but there were usually only 1 or 2 winners in the end. Others would either lose all their investments in the early, middle, and later stages, or helplessly continue to push forward with their own research and development, taking out products and technologies that were not as good as others to drink the leftovers. Most of the time, the leading companies would still be willing to share certain benefits. After all, promoting a new technology and product was different in different countries around the world. Cooperating with local technology companies was the easiest and most profitable way. Even if the leading companies refused to cooperate, the lagging companies could still use national boundaries as barriers to occupy a relative market in their own land. Because of this, Chen Guang slightly underestimated the backlash from Sanshin Group and the Japanese consortium. Sitting on the plane, listening to the conversation of the Japanese people next to him, he finally understood the reason. The 2 people next to him were talking about himself and photocatalysis. These 2 people seemed to be professors at Japanese universities, and they were very familiar with the progress in the global science and technology field. The reason why these 2 forces were willing to take the risk was because of Chen Guang's absolute lead in the field of photocatalysis. Unlike other scientific research competitions, the 5 God-level formulas he took out were too far ahead of others. No one could see any hope of turning the tables. Even the tried and tested barriers in other fields were meaningless. No company that produced water pollution could resist the temptation of these 5 photocatalysts. The cost control that this once and for all technology could bring was enough to make everyone go crazy. Although it would be very expensive to purchase the materials for the first time, After the adoption of these new products, the entire sewage treatment process would be greatly simplified. Whether it was energy consumption, drug consumption, labor costs, or even the construction costs in the new process treatment process, they would all undergo earth-shaking changes. It was the nature of businessmen to pursue profits. Unless there was a policy that completely violated the law of the market, no one in the world would be able to resist these 5 formulas, and the national barriers would completely disappear. As the 2 companies that were completely excluded by Chung Wang, they would completely lose. Therefore, Sanshun Group and the Japanese consortium finally chose the only way out. Unfortunately, they failed. At this point, Sanshun Group had paid the price. The strange death of their leader would make them a mess. Now they had no time to care about what was happening in the outside world. When Shun Guang stood in front of the world again, people in Sanshun Group might have doubts, but they wouldn't do anything. Maybe they would even pray that the terrible curse would not continue to spread to them. After a day of work, Yamada Hideho dragged his tired body back to his home on the 9th floor of the Capitol building in the center of Tokyo City. This was a duplex apartment with a floor area of nearly 300 square meters. This kind of house might not be very luxurious, but in this area, in this building, this type of apartment determined the value of this house to be close to 80 million renminbi. People who were qualified to live in this building were either rich or powerful in Japan. Some people might say that not living in a villa was not a hero, but that was pure bullshit. Only God knew how expensive a house in Tokyo City was. Yamada Hideho was the eldest son of the chairman of Yamada Corporation and the current executive president of the corporation. His identity was one of the top people in the world. And Yamada Corporation was the main sponsor of Waseda Photocatalyst Laboratory. If Waseda could produce results, then Yamada Kai would be the biggest beneficiary. They had the highest proportion of ownership of the patent, and they could enjoy the economic benefits brought by the transformation of the results. Of course, if Waseda's research results were destroyed, the nearly $700 million that Yamada Kai had invested in it would go down the drain. Losing their investment was not the most devastating part. Now that the whole world knew that photocatalyst technology could be called an epic-making new field, what they lost was the future. Although many people still thought that this field was slightly metaphysical, it was hard to say whether it was true or not. But in the end, it was because the relevant technology on the market was not mature and the catalytic reaction conditions were too harsh. After the businessmen got the half-baked technology, they exaggerated it to make huge profits. In the end, many people thought that the so-called photocatalyst was a scam. But real scholars knew that things were not as simple as ordinary people thought. It was not that there were no powerful photocatalysts, but the production cost was too high, and the effect could not reach the point where people could ignore the cost. But judging from the technical results revealed by Zhuo Jingxi, the person in charge of the newly established Morning Light Environmental Protection, the formula in her hands could reach the point where it could ignore the cost, and she had already developed a mature industrial production process. She was even currently conducting industrial production in the laboratory, and it would soon be put into use. The impact of this on the entire industry was self-evident. If Morning Light Environmental Protection completed the entire process in the current state that they had announced, then the Waseda Photocatalyst Laboratory that was fully sponsored by Yamada Corporation would definitely become cannon fodder. Therefore, Yamada Hideho made the decision to fund a bounty on the real person behind Morning Light Environmental Protection, Chun Guang, and his family. He even expanded the scope of the bounty to all of his close friends. Of course, everything was a cover. The ultimate goal was still to kill Chun Guang, and then encourage those in power in America to get their hands on the photocatalyst. With the relationship between Japan and the United States, as well as Yamada Kai's network, as long as the owner of the technology became the United States, they would definitely be entitled to a share of the wealth. This way, Waseda, which had been excluded from the circle, could be reborn, and Yamada Kai would not be left empty-handed. Previously, they had succeeded, but Yamada Hideho did not feel relaxed at all. There was still a lot of work to be done. He had even booked a flight ticket to Washington in advance. It was 3 days later. However, this morning, news of the death of the old Schultz's family suddenly came from the other side of the Pacific Ocean. At the same time, another ally, the person in charge of Sanshin Group, was also killed. Yamada Hideho was confused and terrified. He did not know what he should do next. That night, before he went home, there were actually hidden sentries all over the Imperial Capitol building. He could not be sure if the heavy losses of the Schultz family and Sanshin Group were the revenge of Chen Guang's men. However, his instinct told him that he had to do something. It was very likely that he would be the next one to be cursed. Not only him, but the old house of the Yamada family, where Yamada Hideho's father, Yamada Masaichi, lived, was also on guard. At 8:30 that night, Chen Guang officially stepped onto the shiny floor of the East Capitol Airport. The moment he walked out of the ferry, he saw at least 8 hidden sentries in the hall not far away. These people were scrutinizing everyone who got off the plane. Chen Guang took the initiative to hold Yin Yu's arm, as if nothing had happened. Yin Yu leaned towards Chen Guang again and pressed her full breasts on Chen Guang's arm. The expression on her face was very sweet, but her heart was calm. She really could not get excited. Only she, who was leaning close to Chen Guang, could understand that at this moment, the heart of the former director of the Guangdong General Administration was so cold that it made people shiver. Chapter 1220. Mr. Zhong, are we going to stay here first, or are we going to walk around Tokyo? It's rare to come here. It's a pity not to see the scenery here. As the two walked out of the airport hand in hand, Yin Yu, who was leaning on Chen Guang, suggested casually. Chen Guang thought for a moment. Let's walk around, go to Shinjuku, and see Kabukicho. You men only know how to go to these romantic places all day long. What do you know? This is the biggest feature of Japan. This is the pillar of other people's industry. I came here as an international friend, of course. I have to spread the prestige of the Chinese people. Go, 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 go. If you talk too much, get the hell out of my hotel. Yin Yu shook Chen Guang's arm and said coquettishly, Okay, you're the boss. You have the final say. I know I'm wrong. Although Yin Yu had disguised herself as a middle-aged woman, she still had a pretty face and a charming figure. Her appearance at this time was really a bit pitiful. Chen Guang's face was seduced, his heart was calm, but the passers-by felt that he was too much. How could he be so fierce to a beautiful woman? At least you know what's good for you. Chen Guang proudly straightened his neck like a nouveau riche. After that, the two casually took a taxi and went straight to Shinjuku. Just after the two left, the short man who was standing on the side of the road with them, anxiously waiting for a taxi, suddenly walked back, took out his phone, and made a call. It's not these two. Are you sure? This man and woman just happened to fly from Los Angeles to Tokyo today, the most suspicious. I'm sure they're not a problem. The man should be a rich man. The woman is his female secretary or something. These two have already taken a taxi to Shinjuku, saying that they are going to Kabukicho. They got in Kawaguchi's car. If there is any abnormality, Kawaguchi will report. Very good, Kitajima. You arranged well. Continue to do your job. After the matter is over, your credit will be recorded. You will become a level 5 member of our Yamada group. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Takahashi. Chen Guang and Yin Yu didn't stay idle in the taxi. Ever since the two of them said that they were going to Shinjuku, the taxi driver became especially enthusiastic. He even introduced the two of them to the traditional restaurants he was familiar with in broken English. It was said that they could even find famous teachers from home and abroad, just that the prices were a little higher. Chen Guang listened with great interest. He also used his broken English to converse with him in various ways. He talked about Muto-sensei, Matsushima-sensei, and then lamented over Makura-sensei's retirement. He then talked about Ohashi-sensei, who had suddenly fallen off the pedestal, and finally Hattori-sensei, who had been popular for many years and was still considered an outstanding talent. Chauffeur Kawaguchi was furious at Ohashi-sensei's depravity. He felt that her behavior had tarnished his many years of beautiful memories and hurt his heart. On the other hand, Chen Guang expressed that infantrymen were more popular in China. Cavalry might have a hazy beauty, and the standard of knights might be higher than infantrymen. But for the majority of the Chinese spectators, the close-quarters combat of the sword and shield warriors was the most enjoyable. The old driver Kawaguchi asked Chen Guang how much it cost to buy DVDs in China. Didn't he hear that these things were banned in China? Chen Guang chuckled. It's better for Japanese friends to take clothes. In this world, there's a tool called a network drive or magnetic links. At the very least, you can download it. If that doesn't work, you can still ask for help from Tieba. At the very least, you can find vanilla pomegranate. It was free of charge. The old driver Kawaguchi cried on the spot and swore that he must go to China one day, not for anything else, but for the Huahua internet world that Chen Guang had described for him. After all, the overseas publication of infantry could not be found in Japan. Even if it was found, it could not be downloaded. Chen Guang patted his chest and said, "My friend, just come. I'll give you 2 TB portable hard drives." When the two got out of the car, the old driver Kawaguchi took out a gilded card from the toolbox in the front passenger seat and stuffed it into Chen Guang's hand enthusiastically. "Mr. Zhong, the manager of this shop is my junior high classmate. Tell him that you are a Chinese friend of Kawaguchi Nangyun. He will prepare the best service for you. If you're lucky, you can even meet Ms. Aso Yuki in the shop." Looking at the taxi speeding away, Inu rolled her eyes at Chen Guang. "What were you two talking about just now? I can understand every word, but I don't know any of these names." Chen Guang only laughed. "You don't understand? You really don't understand. As the eldest disciple of Yuan Kuei's sect, your business skills still need to be improved. All right, I'll cram on this knowledge when I get back. Oh yes, there was no need for you to talk so much with the driver just now, right?" Chen Guang shook his head. "Can't you tell? He is a member of the Yamada Kai, and we only managed to escape their surveillance now. So, are we going to the custom shop now? I don't really want to go to the pederast." Chen Guang patted Inyu's head. "Save it. I thought you were going to look for Yamada Hideo." "Huh? That's not what you meant?" Chen Guang lowered his head and fiddled with his phone. "What do you think? It will take an hour to walk from here to the Capitol building in Shinjuku. If I'm quick, I should be able to reach the building in 15 minutes. What about me? Let's go to this custom shop." Chen Guang shook the gilded card in his hand. Inyu was stunned. Glancing at Su Tao, Chen Guang responded, "There's nothing too deceitful in war, understand? What are you planning to do? You'll understand when we get to the custom shop. Why are you talking so much?" Inyu is a special talent from the underworld. There were pros and cons. The pros were that the skills she knew were beyond the reach of ordinary people. The cons were that compared to real agents, she was too talkative and not obedient. On the other hand, after Kawaguchi sent Chen Guang off, he immediately gave a call to the head of the Yamada group, Mr. Takahashi, and gave a brief report on their conversation along the way. "Mr. Takahashi, there's no way this Chinese guy is a problem. I swear on my honor that he's not a top assassin, and he's definitely not Chen Guang's friend. He's just an ordinary tourist, and he's familiar with our culture. I didn't expect that, even though he's a middle-aged man, he would know the names of all the actresses I mentioned. If he didn't spend a lot of time on this, he wouldn't be able to do this. All right, he's just an old pervert." With Kawaguchi and Kitajima's assurance, the surveillance on Chen Guang and Inyu finally disappeared. As for Chen Guang, he walked into the custom shop that Kawaguchi recommended. It was a top-notch club on the 3rd floor of Shinjuku Tonglan Street. Chapter 1221. Inyu finally understood Chen Guang's intention when the two of them entered the luxurious private room that cost more than 200,000 Japanese yen. Chen Guang coughed lightly and said to Inyu, "I ordered Jing Xiang. She is a very strong veteran driver. In other people's eyes, I should be playing crazily with you and her right now, but I will go out of this window later, understand? What about me? Where should I go? What am I going to do? Also, you want to use this famous actress as a disguise, right? But how can we make her not tell others about you leaving? Are we going to kill her?" Although Inyu was a senior member of the Moon's Sunflower sect, she was not a virgin, but in this foreign country, this place filled with decadent atmosphere. As a young girl, she subconsciously panicked and lost, and the question she asked was also quite unprofessional. Chen Guang only chuckled and patted her shoulder. "Isn't this your mission?" "What do you mean?" As far as I know, your Moon Sunflower sect has a very special move, right? Chen Guang asked meaningfully. Yin Yu's eyebrows twitched. You mean the Yin Sunflower technique? Uh-huh. Do you have the confidence to do it? Chen Guang nodded. All right, I give up. You've really given me a difficult task. Chen Guang coughed lightly. Raising an army for 1,000 days. Using it for a single day. This is your specialty. But the opponent is a top expert who has seen thousands of mountains and rivers. Don't you know to let them find a rookie? Cough, cough. To be honest, it is a bit difficult to find a rookie in this kind of place. Not to mention this is Shinjuku. What's more, the stronger the opponent, wouldn't it be a more sufficient alibi for me? Also, different from ordinary people, famous people are easier to find out about their background, and we're also less likely to be suspected. Actually, it wasn't that Chen Guang was afraid of the Japanese Secret Service organization. With him here, even if they pulled out a big gun, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him and Inu. He just didn't want to expand this matter to too many unrelated people. Otherwise, with his personality, once he went against the people of the island country's military in this place, as long as he started killing, things would immediately become more serious than he imagined. After waiting for about half an hour, the tall and slender teacher, Jing Xiang, followed behind the manager and walked in with a very enthusiastic attitude. Firstly, Ningyun Kawaguchi's introduction was really useful. Although Ningyun Kawaguchi was a fake driver, this manager was really his classmate. They had known each other since childhood. As a member of the Yamada group, Kawaguchi's status was also quite high, and his words were quite effective. Secondly, Chen Guang was also very generous. With a raise of his hand, he gave the manager a tip of 100,000 yen and even promised to give Jing Xiang teacher a reward of 1 million yen. This was simply a sky-high price. Although she heard that it was a Chinese, she was a little hesitant when she received this business. But after hearing from the manager that the customer was a good person and that he brought his own dry food and his attitude was also very kind, she was not so resistant. Chen Guang smiled and got up to say hello, then said that he was going to take a bath and let Inu accompany Jing Xiang teacher to play. Seeing this situation, there was no need for Inu to explain. Jing Xiang immediately understood the intention of this rich businessman, surnamed Zhong. As expected of a rich person who knew how to play, no wonder he wanted me to bring people here. It turned out that he wanted to play with the three of them. But if that was the case, why did he bring this woman? It was better to call another good sister. Forget it. Maybe he had some kind of quirk. When she got closer, sat next to Inu, and looked at this woman up close, Jing Xiang teacher finally understood why the rich businessman, surnamed Zhong, couldn't bear to part with this woman. Although she was a little older, this middle-aged woman was really not ordinary beautiful. Even among her peers, there were not many who could compare. At this time, Inu seemed a little reserved at this time, using her rather poor English to say things like hello, nice to meet you, and so on. Of course, she was pretending, but it was just to cooperate with Chen Guang to use his Yin Sunflower technique and to reduce the other party's vigilance to the greatest extent. Jing Xiang teacher didn't think that she was the real first sister, but instead very enthusiastically used her salt and pepper-flavored English to negotiate with the other party, basically saying things like, please don't be nervous, don't worry, I'm a professional, I will guide you well, and guarantee to provide you with the best quality service, and so on. The sound of water splashing came from the bathroom, but here, the two women had quickly entered the state. Inu, who perfectly played the role of a first sister, had used very high efficiency to peel off Jing Xiang teacher and herself into white rice dumplings. This was obviously much faster than the normal pace, and Jing Xiang was a little not used to it, but she quickly got out of this state of mind and turned her attention to Inu, who was next to her looking at her nervously. Missing, you put your hand here, yes, like this. 5 minutes later, Chen Guang quietly opened the door, and the clothes on his body were not wet at all. With the help of the pink hazy light, he saw the naked Inu sitting on the bed with her legs crossed, with a cigarette in her mouth that he didn't know when she bought, and Jing Xiang teacher was slumped beside her, unconscious. Seeing that Chen Guang came out, Inu didn't feel embarrassed at all. She dropped her legs, stretched her back, and said 2 words with a smoke ring in her mouth. Done. If it weren't for other things in his mind, Chen Guang might not have been able to resist this temptation at a different time with a different person. He took 2 steps forward and asked, "How long can it last?" As he said that, his nose twitched twice. "The smell is a little strange." Inu shook her shoulders. "That's because her secretion is too much. She won't wake up for 3 hours. Anyway, this room belongs to us tonight. You can arrange your own time." 3 hours? That's just enough. No, this smell isn't that simple. Okay. Do you think the Ean sunflower technique is just moving my hands? How can it be so easy? To use this unique technique, in addition to my exquisite techniques and the inner force of the moon's sunflower sect, I also need to supplement it with medicine, not to mention that I'm dealing with an experienced expert this time. Where did you get the medicine? Inu blinked. Do you really want to know? No. Goodbye. Chen Guang waved his hand, turned around, and left. He didn't have time to waste here. Besides, if he stayed any longer, he was really afraid that he would lose his integrity in his old age. After going out, Chen Guang used the flowing light technique and walked openly on the street. In the eyes of ordinary people, there was nothing unusual about him, and he was only guarding against the rather advanced surveillance cameras in Dongdu. In this aspect, Dongdu was better than Luo City, perhaps because Japan focused more on the modern electronic facilities of these cities. If someone had nothing to do and focused their gaze on Chen Guang for a long time, they might occasionally find that he was very strange. His figure would flicker from time to time like an electronic character. It wasn't that he was weak, but there were some places where he couldn't avoid being recorded by 2 or 3 surveillance cameras from different angles, which was a new challenge for him. The original flowing light technique couldn't deal with a multi-angle refraction of light. Fortunately, the person who used this technique was Chen Guang, a martial sage that had never existed in true martial land, the Earth Explosion savior Chen Guang himself, who had combined more than 400,000 unique skills and created the true martial divine skill. Okay, this title was too long. In short, after a few attempts, he successfully improved the flowing light technique and could be invisible from multiple angles, but consumed a lot of energy. About 20 minutes later, he stood at the bottom of the Capitol building. He raised his head and looked up. He knew that Yamada Hideho lived on the 9th floor. Fortunately, the wall wasn't made of pure glass. It was uneven and had a very complicated shape, which made it easy for him to sneak in. Walking around the Capitol's skyscraper, Chen Guang lowered his head to look at his watch. It was already past midnight, and the pedestrians were still bustling. But when Chen Guang hid under the shadow of a tree, no one noticed his existence. He didn't rush to go online, but hid in the shadows to adjust his breath. Yamada Hideho was sitting in the study, frowning as he fiddled with the computer in front of him. In fact, he had fallen asleep just now, but he couldn't fall asleep after tossing and turning, so he got up. Floating in front of him was a 3D projection of the Imperial Capitol building. There were more than 200 green dots patrolling around the building. Each green dot represented a smartwatch that was worn on the pulse of a security guard. Not only could it be used as a Bluetooth headset, but it could also monitor the heartbeat of each security guard. If there was any abnormality, be it a sudden acceleration or a slowdown of the security guard's heartbeat, the signal would be transmitted to the command center immediately. Then, the command center could immediately mobilize the surveillance cameras in the building to monitor the location of the abnormality. Moreover, no matter where it was, it could ensure that at least 3 people would arrive within 30 seconds. Due to the incident in Luoyang City on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, the Yamadagumi spared no effort to protect their prince. They even replaced the entire building's security guards with their own people. Not only that, but the surveillance on the outside of the Capitol building didn't relax either. It was almost to the point where there were no blind spots. There were at least 8 people hiding in the patrol cars near the Capitol building, paying attention to the surveillance cameras at the same time. However, it was useless because they were facing Chen Guang. No matter how tight the security was, there would still be loopholes in the face of someone with ulterior motives. Moreover, it was Chen Guang who had all kinds of special skills. After adjusting his breathing, Chen Guang used his qigong. Without making any sound, he went straight up the tree behind him. Then, He took advantage of the moment when the patrol officers turned their heads and lightly tapped on the branch that was only as thick as a thumb. With a whoosh, he shot up to the outer wall of the Capitol building. Yamada Hideho stretched and minimized the 3D image in front of him. Then, he opened his office software. He decided not to sleep tonight. He didn't have to go to the company tomorrow morning. In the afternoon, he had to wait until 3 o'clock to host a meeting. He didn't need to say anything in this meeting. He only needed to show his face. The meeting was to discuss the next step of the Yamada Group's Photo Catalyst project with Waseda University. In fact, they had already come to a conclusion on this matter. They were just informing the other shareholders. The others didn't have the right or qualification to object. However, he was a little hesitant now. He had asked his friends in China to do everything they could to investigate what kind of strategy Chen Guang and the forces related to him had used. However, they had found nothing. Then, he thought of the assassins who were lured by the bounty to deal with Chen Guang and were cursed. A strong sense of uneasiness rose from the bottom of his heart. This feeling came so abruptly that it even caused his entire body to shiver in an instant. He got up abruptly and went back to the bedroom. He shook the woman lying on the bed to wake her up. "Akai, wake up. I have to leave." The woman rubbed her sleepy eyes. "Where are you going? What are you going to do?" "I don't know, but I have to leave immediately." "Why?" "I suspect that Chen Guang isn't dead. No, maybe he has turned into a spirit and is looking for the people who dealt with him." "Wake up. You're Yamada Hideho, the CEO of the Yamada Group. Not those silly boys who like to read manga. Are you hallucinating because you've been too tired recently?" "Okay, Akai, you're right. I'll go make a cup of tea. I need to wake up." Yamada Hideho shook his head. He felt that he was being too sensitive. Since this morning, Yamada Group's people had been placed in any place where suspicious people might appear, be it the port or the airport. Even if Yamada Group lacked manpower in other cities, they could contact other forces for help. They had done everything they could, and there couldn't be any loopholes. Am I really being too sensitive? Standing in front of the window, Yamada Hideho took a sip of the hot tea. He felt the hot feeling pass through his throat. The strong stimulation made him feel a little calmer. I shouldn't be scaring myself. Yes, that must be it. Maybe the Schultz family or Sanshan Group provoked the forces that they shouldn't have, and they just happened to die at the same time. All of this is just a coincidence. Yamada Hideho strengthened his confidence again. Then he turned around and saw Chen Guang standing in front of him. Chen Guang also felt that he might have been a little too much. Ever since he let go of the restraint and decided to end these things with his own hands, he had been fascinated by the feeling of appearing behind others' backs. If I have to give myself a nickname based on my killing methods, I should probably be called the Backstabber. Yamada Hideho's first reaction was to open his mouth and scream, just like everyone else's. But Chen Guang, who was prepared, wouldn't give him the chance. Before Yamada Hideho's pupils began to widen and his mouth opened, Chen Guang had already grabbed his neck. Then Chen Guang said, "No one can save you. You're already a dead man. You're standing here now because the Grim Reaper is still on his way." Yamada Hideho looked at Chen Guang with a pleading look, hoping that Chen Guang would give him a chance to speak. But Chen Guang didn't give him the chance. He exerted a little force with his fingers and blocked Yamada Hideho's windpipe with his fingertips. As time went by, Yamada Hideho's face gradually turned livid. He struggled with all his might, but it was to no avail. After livid, his face turned red. Then his head tilted and he died tragically. Chen Guang let go of his hand and murmured to himself. In fact, he had already guessed what this guy wanted to say. He wanted to beg Chen Guang to let the others go. Chen Guang turned his head and looked in the direction of the bedroom again. In the end, he didn't kill the woman named Akai. It was meaningless. After leaving the Capitol building, Chen Guang went straight to the Yamada family's mansion, which was half an hour away. Just like the day before, the whole world was shocked again the next morning. Yamada and his son died mysteriously in their own home. They died of suffocation for no reason. No one knew what had happened. As for Chen Guang, he stayed in the hotel calmly with Inyu. When she woke up in Jingxiang last night, she saw Chen Guang and Inyu putting on their clothes and getting ready to leave. In her chaotic memory, She couldn't remember clearly what had happened last night. She only remembered that the woman named Yu was intimate with her. Then she fainted because she was too excited. As for the rich man named Zhong, he seemed to have woken up later. Her lower body was still aching, but it was not unacceptable. It was like the feeling after shooting a blockbuster. Forget it. For the sake of the million pills, I'll just let it be. Chapter 1222. Chun Guang's attitude towards the flood of the outside world was the same as before. He only cared about himself and did not care about it. Even if the entire Dongdu was turned upside down because of the death of the Yamada father and son, he did not care. Instead of paying attention to these things, it was better to focus on the country again. Speaking of which, there was another episode in the country. Last night, Chu Zijin's meticulously prepared my God. The fourth episode was finally broadcasted. Chili TV, major live-streaming websites, and video websites were released at the same time. It was said that the show had achieved unprecedented success. The all-rounder Chun Guang personally became the show's biggest gimmick. In addition, the show's effect was quite explosive. After watching it, the audience was in an uproar. There was a lot of good comments, but there were also many bad comments. The extremely divided reputation did not affect the show's popularity at all. Instead, it continued to grow. However, at this time, Chun Guang was in a special situation. In the end, these news only gathered into a short briefing message and appeared on his mobile phone. Chun Guang wanted to use his mobile phone to see how the video of the show was edited and if the post-production was good. However, considering that he was in Japan, if he used traditional traffic, he might be caught. For the time being, he decided to watch it when he returned. Anyway, the boat was sinking. Whether he watched it or not, he could not change anything. He should choose to believe in Chu Zijin's planning ability. There was no reason for her to fall into the same trap for the fourth time in a row. The chaos in Dongdu continued. Whether it was people from Huaxia or people from other countries flying to Japan, they were quite annoyed and had to face repeated inquiries and investigations. Even Chun Guang and Yu, who had long been labeled as harmless, were found by 4 groups of people within 2 hours and asked different questions. Generally, it was questions such as where were they last night, who were they with, and what did they do. Chun Guang and Yu easily dealt with the pre-planned speech. With the report submitted by the sub-leader Takahashi and Kawaguchi Noyan last night, and the testimony of the famous female artist Kyoka, the two were easily cleared of suspicion and finally completely settled down at noon. However, others were not so lucky. Not only the Chinese, but other tourists and travelers from all over the world did not have it any better. They were either interrogated openly, investigated secretly, or monitored. The members of the Yamada group had almost gone crazy and were about to turn Tokyo upside down, but Chun Guang calmly allowed Yu to return to the country on her own. As for himself, according to the original plan, he should leave with them and go back to his hometown as soon as possible. He had even booked a plane ticket, but he suddenly decided to change his itinerary. He rescheduled the plane ticket to the night, rented a car, and went straight to Mount Fuji with the navigation. It was not that he was in the mood to travel, but since he opened his eyes this morning, he had felt something in his heart. This feeling was very strange. He couldn't tell what was attracting him, but he subconsciously felt that since he was already here, he might as well take a look. This was not because Chun Guang had become emotional, but because he had begun to believe in metaphysics. If there's a thought in your heart that drives you to do something, then don't think too much and just do it bravely. If you do it, you may not regret it, but if you don't, you will definitely regret it in the future. With this thought, Chun Guang drove the car to the foot of Mount Fuji at the maximum speed of the highway. As a Chinese, he did not have a good impression of the scenic spots in Japan, but people had a natural closeness to beautiful scenery, which made him feel very twisted. What was even more strange was that after coming to the foot of the mountain, the inexplicable impulse deep in his heart did not weaken, but became stronger, constantly urging him to go to the top of the mountain. However, now was not the time to climb Mount Fuji. Only in July and August every year was the suitable time to climb this famous scenic spot in Japan. Now, he could only take the cable car to the mountainside, and it was impossible to go up through the regular channel. In addition, no matter how fast he walked now, if he chose to go up the mountain now, he would not be able to catch the night flight. Helplessly looking up at the inverted fan-shaped Mount Fuji in the distance, Chen Guang frowned. He wanted to come back as soon as possible, but he inexplicably wanted to go up and see what would happen. He only hated that he didn't have a clone technique, and he couldn't really fly in the sky like a sword immortal. Otherwise, he could fly up now. Then he took out his phone and began to look for top-secret information on it. When he saw something on the map, his eyes suddenly lit up. Perhaps it was a blessing from God. There was a commercial heliport at the foot of the mountain, and there were helicopters for rent. Although at this time, and in this climate, this kind of helicopter with a pilot would definitely not be rented out, other pilots had not lived enough. But Chen Guang could drive it himself. After asking for a warm cup of milk tea from a nearby milk tea shop, Chen Guang strolled to the airport. After thinking about it for about 5 seconds, he decided to do something big. Although he also had a pilot's license and his pseudonym Zhong Jun's identity, this was a special skill, and the two countries did not have direct access. At this time, his identity was just an ordinary rich tourist. If the name Zhong Jun suddenly appeared on Mount Fuji with a helicopter driver's license, it would become quite suspicious. But if he didn't provide a driver's license, it was impossible for others to let him drive the helicopter, even if they directly paid for it. Therefore, other than being a thief, Chen Guang had no other choice. He sneaked out of the airport and looked around. The gate was locked, and there was not a single guard. Well, normally, who would have thought that a helicopter could be stolen? Half an hour later, in the midst of the chaos, a civilian helicopter with white paint suddenly took off. Before the management of the scenic area could react, the helicopter disappeared in the sky at an extremely fast speed and went straight to the top of the mountain. The guards of Mount Fuji only chased from halfway up the mountain for less than 15 minutes before they turned back in frustration. Snow had begun to fall on the mountain, and the road up the mountain had been blocked. It was impossible to send a helicopter to chase in this weather. The snowy weather was difficult for others, but it was not difficult for Chen Guang. As long as the performance of the machinery allowed it, he could maximize the effect of the machinery. Half an hour later, the bold and careful Chen Guang stopped the helicopter on a large rock near the crater with quite exquisite operation. Then he got out of the helicopter and walked to the crater on the thick snow in the face of the wind and snow. He used his qin gong, and it really felt like he was walking on the snow without leaving a trace. His flying speed was extremely fast. The higher he went, the closer he was to the crater at the top of the mountain, the stronger the strange feeling in Chen Guang's heart. Looking back, all he could see was a blanket of pure white snow. The afternoon sun hung high in the sky, but there were snowflakes falling from the sky. When the sunlight shone on the body, it made people feel warm and genial, but the cold winter wind and snowflakes made people feel very cold. This feeling of dislocation made people feel very strange. Chen Guang walked on the edge of the crater. White smoke was rising from the center of the deep depression in front of him, but below the white smoke was the lake-like snow. The strange feeling in his heart was like a beast that was about to break out of its cage, and it was even as fierce as an uncontrollable drug addict. But he didn't know where this strange feeling came from. He simply sat down with his legs crossed and tried to communicate with Ruri in his heart. However, Ruri in the cup in his arms didn't give him any feedback, and he didn't know what she was busy with. Even when Chen Guang sank his mind into the world in the cup, he didn't find Ruri. He wanted to scold her, but Chen Guang let it go after thinking about it. Things had turned out like this, and indeed many things were beyond her expectation. After all, Ruri was just a victim trapped in the heavenly Holy Grail. She was not the real artifact spirit of the Holy Grail, and it was normal that she didn't know the many mysteries and changes of the Holy Grail. As the owner of the Holy Grail, he still didn't understand anything. Thinking about it carefully, he was in no position to criticize her at all. When Chen Guang tried to extend his mind out from the world of Cloud City of the Holy Grail, the tentacles of his mind were firmly blocked by an invisible barrier, and he could only retreat completely. However, his perception of the outside world had become sharper. Not long after, his whole body suddenly trembled. What was this? In the sky above his head, a strange long and narrow crack had mysteriously appeared. This crack was at least a few kilometers long and a few hundred meters wide. Its shape was twisted like lightning, and it disappeared in the sky in a flash. But in the instant that it appeared, it happened to be caught by Chen Guang's eyes. On the other side of the crack was an indescribably deep darkness. Chen Guang sucked in a cold breath. The power of the Holy Grail that filled the entire world suddenly grew denser with this sudden change. Don't tell me I have to fuse now? Damn, you're messing with me. How am I going to get home? No, even if I take the plane with you, it doesn't seem to be of any use. I still won't be able to make it in time. Chen Guang muttered to himself for a while. After realizing that it was impossible, he was no longer so anxious. Anyway, he could not use it recklessly. He might as well let nature take its course. What made his head hurt even more was that he could not even make a phone call now. Although the special communication device in his hand had the ability to receive signals from all over the world, there was no signal coverage in this place at all. Although he could use satellite communication, the magnetic field in this place was rather chaotic, and the signal was seriously affected by geomagnetic interference. Even if Chen Guang wanted to make use of this time to use the special channel to contact his family, he could not do it. Why don't I hurry back home? I'll do my best and leave the rest to fate. His worry for his family and the intense curiosity in his heart that wanted to devour his rationality clashed with each other. But in the end, the safety of his family prevailed. After Chen Guang made up his mind, he could no longer continue to stay here to satisfy his curiosity. He just wanted to leave as soon as possible. He even regretted that he should not have come here to waste time. Even if he still could not make it in time, even if he encountered complete fusion on the plane, at least he could rush back to Lalai as soon as possible after it happened. He did not know when he would be able to make it in time like now. In addition, he stole the plane when he went up Mount Fuji. Although his identity was not found out, it was inevitable that he would be troubled when he returned to the tourist center. It would be tomorrow morning at the earliest before he could return to Lalai County. If there were any unforeseen events, they would be delayed even further. Perhaps he should not have chosen to go out at this time in the first place. It did not matter even if he let the Schultz family, the Sanshin group, and the Yamada Society off for the time being. After the world fusion was completed, if they still existed, it would not be too late to settle the score with them. I regret it. Unfortunately, there is no medicine for regret. Chen Guang muttered in his heart as he sped up on the snow and ran to the boulder where the helicopter was parked. Just as he was about to approach the boulder, a sudden change occurred. A gust of wind suddenly rose from behind him and whistled past him. Even with the strength of his legs, he was still blown forward by the strong wind and almost fell. What was even more unfortunate was that the helicopter that was parked on the boulder was almost blown away like a toy at the same time. Under his dumbfounded gaze, the helicopter rolled down the mountain. After rolling for about 60 or 70 meters, the helicopter crashed down the cliff. Less than 10 seconds later, there was a loud noise from below, followed by a burst of fire. Chen Guang rushed to the edge of the cliff and looked down. At the place where the helicopter landed, he only saw flames, billowing smoke, and a pile of burning scrap metal. Damn it, this is poisonous, he wailed. Before Chen Guang could finish his words, another light suddenly lit up in the sky. When Chen Guang immediately raised his head, he caught a glimpse of the second crack in the sky. Completely different from the previous one, this second crack was bright and dazzling, as if there was a sun hidden inside. The snowflakes that were constantly falling in the air were even cut off by this crack, leaving a long, empty space. At this moment, the heavenly Holy Grail in his arms flew out of his satchel on its own without his summoning and floated in the air. Chen Guang stared at the Grail and wanted to move his body, but he was powerless. He was controlled by an invisible force. Chapter 1223. Even when he was in the world in the cup, Chen Guang had never experienced the feeling of being completely frozen to the point where he couldn't move. It wasn't as simple as his body being restrained. The power to control came from within his body, from his muscles to his bones, to his veins, and even down to his cells. Every part of his body that could be controlled with his mind was completely frozen. Apart from that, the heavenly Holy Grail hovering in the air was flying further and further away. In mid-air, it expanded rapidly like a fatty big sea that was soaked in water. In just a short 10 seconds, the drinking cup turned into a floating tower that was nearly 100 meters tall in front of Chun Guang. Of course, the only thing that changed was the volume. The cup was still the same shape, and even the flying goddess statue that was made of glass was enlarged to the same scale. If not for the fact that the feather robe had shrunk into a bikini, the enlarged version of the goddess statue would have looked even more fairy-like. As the cup changed, the frequency of cracks appearing in the sky suddenly increased. Long, narrow, and disorderly cracks appeared in the sky one after another without any pattern. The scene looked spectacular, but it didn't make a single sound. Chun Guang couldn't do anything about it. He was even worried that the strange phenomenon at the peak of Mount Fuji would attract the attention of others. If all the satellites in the sky were pointed in this direction, it was hard to guarantee that he and the huge, heavenly Holy Grail wouldn't be photographed. Then perhaps his greatest secret would be directly exposed. Wait, the snowflakes aren't falling anymore. Chun Guang squinted and looked at the sky again. The snowflakes that were falling from the sky had completely stopped. All right, it's the familiar time stopping again. This kind of big trick written in fantasy novels has become a common occurrence for me. Chun Guang couldn't be bothered to complain anymore. Anyway, he didn't have to worry about his secret being exposed. He didn't know what would happen next, and there was nothing he could do. He could only watch everything like a statue. He was just a little puzzled. Everything felt normal last night. Although the power of the Holy Grail was still getting stronger, the speed of change was still under control. Based on his estimation, it would take at least 1 to 2 years for the power of the Holy Grail that filled the entire world to completely transform from quantitative to qualitative. Why did it suddenly change so drastically today? This isn't logical. Just as Chun Guang was thinking this, the Holy Grail suddenly began to tremble. The huge lid of the cup rotated and opened on its own. After the lid left its body, it floated towards Chun Guang and landed beside him with a loud bang. As for the cup in midair, some liquid substance began to gush out. This scene shocked Chun Guang to the point that he was burnt on the outside and tender on the inside. He couldn't speak. Although I'm complaining that it's not scientific, you don't have to force it to be scientific. The liquid that was gushing out of the Holy Grail was the power of the Holy Grail, so dense that it couldn't be dissolved. The power of the Holy Grail was supposed to be an existence of energy. Chun Guang did not expect that when this mysterious power appeared in the real world at such a high concentration, it could actually form such a liquid-like effect. However, this thing evaporated very quickly. After gushing out of the cup, it spread out and flowed in all directions. At first, it looked like a waterfall, but before it reached the bottom of the Holy Grail, it completely transformed into a gaseous state and dissipated into the air. Although Chun Guang was trapped in place and unable to move, he was still blown into a mess by the strong wind that was blowing at him. This strong wind was filled with a sweet smell. It was the familiar smell of cooking oil. Tui. This is the power of the Holy Grail that's so dense that it's sweet. But can we not run out of oxygen? Are you trying to suffocate me to death? Before he finished speaking, the liquid that was gushing out of the Holy Grail suddenly surged higher, forming a fountain that was hundreds of meters tall. From below, it looked like a waterspout when a tornado struck. As the liquid rapidly transformed into a gaseous state after falling down, the air instantly became even sweeter. However, Chun Guang no longer felt suffocated. As the power of the Holy Grail completely dispersed and disintegrated into its most basic energy state, the air suddenly returned to normal. Chun Guang was not sure how the power of the Holy Grail fused with the real world. Based on his limited knowledge of university physics and chemistry, he could only speculate that the energy was completely integrated into atoms or an even smaller level in its most basic energy state, just like the van der Waals force between molecules or the chemical bonding force between atoms, or it could be the nuclear force between the protons that made up atoms, or even smaller. According to the research of modern scientific theories, there were even smaller leptons, hadrons, and even quarks below the protons. As for the smallest fundamental particle in modern scientific theories, it was generally believed that a particle with no other internal structure could be considered a fundamental particle. From another perspective, after combining quantum theory and the theory of relativity, it was believed that matter usually had a wave-particle duality, and that particles were made up of strings. The world of quantum physics was so complicated and mysterious. In order to find the existence of a possible particle, scientists even had to wait for hundreds of years for technological advancement. But even so, until now, people still could not confirm that quarks were the smallest particle units. If quarks had volume, then theoretically they could still be divided. However, according to string theory, perhaps the fundamental particles that made up quarks could not exist for a long period of time. Instead, they were always in constant change, constantly changing into another existence as the energy changed. This led the theory back to the wave-particle duality. It could also be considered that matter was energy in a certain sense. It was just like how some theories believed that the photons that made up light were weightless when they were stationary, but if they moved forward at the speed of light and landed on a large enough surface, the light pressure could be measured, which proved that the photons had weight. It was the same complicated and mysterious theory. However, with the further advancement of modern theoretical and practical research, the correctness of quantum theory was once again doubted. Even the foundation of the wave-particle duality theory might be shaken. The exploration of science was always a process of verification and constant questioning. Although many people suspected that as long as matter existed, then it would definitely be eternally and infinitely divided. Even if they knew the answer, they could not find any theoretical proof. They could not prove that it was correct, nor could they prove that it was wrong. It was just like how the ancients knew that the sun must rise and set, but they did not know why it was so. A great man once said, "The more you know, the more ignorant you feel." This sentence could also be applied to modern scientific research. Based on Chen Guang's knowledge as a university student, even if he had taken the initiative to go to the library to search for the mysteries of the Holy Grail, he could only stop at this level. Now he suspected that since the Holy Grail was an existence of energy, and since it could use pure energy as the foundation to form a new body in the world of the cup, then when this energy was fused into the real world, it might be adding another quark in addition to the 6 suspected quark particles. It might also be using an even smaller unit on an even smaller level. If the so-called string theory was really correct, then it could directly change the level of energy or matter at the string level. In the basic composition of all matter, adding a type of string or adding a way to combine the string together. If the string was not the smallest unit, then consider it as the smallest unit. This was too profound, but perhaps it could be explained in a relatively simple way. Assuming that a substation could take care of the residents of 3 nearby residential areas, under normal circumstances, this substation could provide a power of 100,000 kilowatts, but the maximum power that the output circuit could withstand was only 50,000 kilowatts. By modifying the circuit and adding a copper core line parallel to the original output circuit, the substation's maximum power output could then reach 100,000 kilowatts. On the surface, this added circuit did not seem to change anything, but the electricity consumption experience of the residents of these 3 residential areas had already undergone earth-shattering changes. To put it another way, if a marionette had 5 strings, then after adding another string to it, the gameplay would also undergo a huge change. On the surface, it would still look the same, but on the inside, there would be a huge change. Therefore, with the Holy Grail as the core, the current fusion of the real world and the real world should essentially be a new type of basic energy or laws fusing into reality, changing from the microscopic level of the real fundamental particles or energy. But from a macroscopic perspective, perhaps nothing had happened, just like when humans received X-rays, Only God knows how many particles passed through their bodies, but they still ate and drank as usual. Perhaps it was because he was blessed with good fortune. Chen Guang did not expect that he would be able to figure this out at the last moment. He felt a little better. At least he did not have to worry that his parents would be gone when he woke up, and he would become two complete strangers. If that happened, his defeat would be too complete and too miserable. But using his brain could not change the situation in front of him. He still could not move, and with the passage of time, the Holy Grail's power that surged out from the Holy Grail seemed endless, becoming more and more ferocious. The water column of the Holy Grail's power that soared into the sky was even about to break through the horizon and reach into space. The frequency of the space-time fissures appearing in the sky was getting higher, and the fissures were getting thicker and thicker. Each time they appeared, the time it took for them to appear was also getting longer and longer. The saddest thing was that these fissures were getting closer and closer to Chengguang. Only God knew how powerful these fissures were, and when faced with such a situation, the only option left in a normal person's mind would be to quickly run away. As a normal person, Chengguang felt very helpless. So, what exactly happened between last night and now? Why did it turn out like this? Before he was completely swallowed by the fissures, Chen Guang's mind was still painfully thinking about this question. Chapter 1224. Last night, before Chen Guang took Yin to the custom shop, in another time zone in China, a long-awaited variety show, God of Joy, was finally broadcasted. The show was an unprecedented success. Today, many families had countless choices. As a variety show, it achieved more than 15% of the ratings. Especially the special effects scene that was inexplicably released at the end of the show, which made the ratings reach 23% for a short period of time. This almost meant that there were at least 50 million people watching the live broadcast in China alone, and this did not include those who watched the live broadcast on the internet. The special effects scene at the end of the show undoubtedly caused a huge controversy. However, Chu Zijin did not explain this scene in the production of the show. She did not tell others that it was computer special effects, but she also did not say that it really happened. Everything could only be guessed. Chu Zijin's original intention was to use this method to deliberately stir up controversy. The development of the matter was basically the same as what she expected. After the show ended, the popularity of the news skyrocketed on the internet, especially after 10 p.m. Western and American audiences in different time zones woke up one after another. Perhaps they turned on their computers in the company, or perhaps they took out their mobile phones. Then, they were shocked by the shocking popularity of the news and quickly clicked on it. Whether it was Chinese or international audiences, their views of the show were generally similar. The first half of the show seemed to be an exciting variety show that could barely pass. It was a good explanation of the fact that Chen Guang had incredible strength, especially the part where he pulled the high-speed rail with his bare hands. It was quite amazing, as if it was a special effect. However, the show had always promoted reality. No matter how sci-fi it looked, it was indeed something that happened. The almighty Superman Chen Guang could really do it. Combined with the previous videos of him catching bullets with his bare hands, the experience was better, and it was easier to accept this inhuman scene. The real essence was in the second half. If the first half of the show was inhuman, then the second half of the show was completely beyond the scope of human understanding. It was a scene that would only appear in fantasy novels or Western fantasy movies. It was not scientific or reasonable at all. However, this scene happened right after the challenge of reality. It made people subconsciously overturn their first impression and seriously examine or discuss it. Was it real or fake? What was the purpose of shooting this scene? To shoot a movie? There was no need for that. Not to mention the others. Even the Tingguang group had a strong debate about this. The four great Vajras slammed the table and argued endlessly. Yu Hong and Su Li thought that the video was a special effect made by their boss secretly. The reason why he secretly gave it to Mr. Chu of the media company was probably just his usual way of hyping up. However, Fong Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang firmly believed that the video was very likely to be real. Their reason was also very sufficient. Their boss would never do anything without a purpose. He must have a purpose for letting Tianguang Media put this video in the show. According to his own words, and according to his article in Hi. My God. Fong Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang believe that the purpose of his participation in the 4th episode of God of Happiness was to announce to the world that he was unparalleled in the world. That's right. Therefore, the last scene of the show must be real. Then, Yu Hong and Su Li began to slam the table and spit. Damn idiots. You guys should be a little more normal. Use your melon seeds to think. Is there such an incredible creature in this world? Besides, where is he fighting with people? Is there such a place on Earth? You won't even believe it yourself. In the end, Fong Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang were convinced and admitted that it was a special effects scene. Similar discussions like these 4 people were happening all over the world, but in the end, everyone reached a consensus. Although the scene was very real, and there was no trace of special effects, it was indeed something made by computer special effects. It was most likely Chen Guang's next movie. Although there had never been a classic fantasy blockbuster in Chinese movies before, it was worth looking forward to just by looking at the special effects. In just over half a day, at least 1 billion people around the world had seen this scene in the killing world on their computers, mobile phones, or even in the special reports of TV stations, and they had heated discussions about it. No one would have thought that when they saw the video, an invisible thread would appear in their fate. This thread originated from them and spread to the sky, but after leaving the Earth, it dissipated in the invisible void of the universe. At the moment when Chen Guang stood on the top of Mount Fuji, more than 3 billion of the nearly 7 billion people in the world had been connected to the video that Xu Zijin secretly shot in the killing world. They might not have seen it, but at least they had heard it with their ears and knew it in their minds. The moment they knew about it, an additional thread appeared in their fate, but it was thinner than that of the people who had seen the video. Correspondingly, for those who had read it a few times or argued with others over it a few times, the threads that were tied to their destinies became especially thick. In the depths of the universe, which was so far away that it could not be calculated, these billions of threads suddenly condensed together, turned into a sharp cone, pierced through an invisible barrier, and stretched into a certain void. Then, the process of the integration of the real world and the real world, which was originally advancing steadily, was suddenly accelerated. These threads were like the iron chain on an anchor, pulling the 2 worlds together. This was the real reason why the integration of the worlds was suddenly completed when Chen Guang was on Mount Fuji. After his figure was swallowed by the crack, Liuli's long-disappeared figure slowly appeared in the sky above Cloud City in the heavenly Holy Grail. At this moment, she looked a little disheveled. Her face was charred black, and her hair was disheveled. Liuli kept stomping her feet unwillingly. She looked up at the sky above Cloud City, where there was a vortex that was so huge that it could cover the sky above Cloud City, and it was sucking crazily. The power of the Holy Grail in the space of Cloud City was being sucked out at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, the pure white ground of Cloud City was rapidly melting. It first turned into liquid, then evaporated, and the gaseous power of the Holy Grail was replenished. The ground of Cloud City was sinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. Looking at this scene, Liuli sighed and muttered to herself, "Damn it, I still failed. Brat, I try my best." It turned out that recently, Liuli had realized that the situation was not good, so she took the initiative to suppress the heavenly Holy Grail. Her operation was considered successful before, but it was ultimately because of the high. My God, too many unrelated people were connected to the power of the heavenly Holy Grail, thus destroying the barrier between the 2 worlds and completely completing the process of the world integration. Under the precondition that time had stopped, perhaps only a moment had passed, or perhaps tens of billions of years had passed, Chen Guang finally opened his eyes slowly. What he saw was not the snow-covered scenery of Mount Fuji, but a familiar bed. The mahogany mosquito net rack, which had a history of at least 10 years, was placed on his head. It was very eye-piercing. What was even more eye-piercing was the poster pasted on the wall next to the mosquito net rack. It was Ronaldo, who had participated in the 2002 World Cup with Fu's head. Chen Guang's mind was in a mess. If he remembered correctly, this poster was pasted on the wall when he was still in primary school. At that time, Brazil had just won the World Cup, and Fatty had scored 2 goals in the final. I can't possibly be reborn as a child, right? Rub, 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 rub. It wasn't easy for me to conquer the world. My hundreds of millions of assets. It wasn't easy for me to get so many girls. It wasn't easy for me to practice all these amazing skills. It King sent me back to the past. It rewound for me. CK, CK, CK. Chen Guang screamed and sat up straight, thumping his chest and stamping his feet. And no, my height doesn't seem to have changed. He looked down at his arms, which had blue veins popping out because of his perfect body, and then casually picked up his phone from beside the pillow and snapped a selfie. His eyes weren't playing tricks on him. It was still this familiar, handsome face, and he hadn't returned to his childhood. Then what the hell is this? I'm clearly on Mount Fuji, but why am I lying on the bed of the old house I lived in more than 10 years ago when I woke up? At this moment, the door of Chen Guang's bedroom was pushed open with a bang. It was his father, Chen Guoli, who barged in. "Oh, Dad." Chen Guang's eyes were filled with tears, and he finally felt at ease. Looking at his father's face and eyes, he knew that his father was still his biological father. There was nothing wrong with him. "Bro, double hit. What are you howling about? Can't you make me less worried? Don't you know what time it is? You only know how to sleep." Chen Guoli rushed up and slapped his head. It was a man-singles technique that Chen Guang was quite familiar with. Chen Guang didn't feel any pain after being hit. Instead, he was happy. Chen Guoli immediately realized that something was wrong. He looked at Chen Guang with a strange expression. "My silly daughter, did the nightmare make you stupid? Your dad is cooking in the kitchen." Chen Guang stared. If he didn't hear wrongly, Dad's logic was a little messed up. Silly daughter. On the other side, Chen Guoli looked at Chen Guang's confused face and panicked. He thought that he had beaten up Chen Guang, so he turned around and shouted, CK? My daughter's father. Quick, come over and take a look. There's something wrong with Chen Guang's brain." Chen Guang jumped off the bed and grabbed Chen Guoli's shoulder. "Dad, what's wrong with you?" "There's nothing wrong with me." "What's wrong with you?" Chen Guoli was even more agitated than Chen Guang. He said angrily, "You call this nothing wrong with you? You don't even recognize me. I'm your mother." Chen Guang hissed as he inhaled a breath of cold air. 10,000 alpacas were galloping in his heart. "Damn it. Mommy. It's over." Chapter 1225. That's right. You finally recognize me as your mother. Chen Guoli looked at Chen Guang with satisfaction. He had no idea that his gaze and expression were giving his precious daughter the creeps. With that said, Chen Guoli patted Chen Guang's head again. "What do you mean? Hurry up and wash up and have breakfast. Don't forget that you still have to tutor your brother in the morning." Chen Guang continued to look dumbfounded. He was alarmed. Holy *T. Does this mean that not only did I not lose a family member after the world fusion, but I even gained a brother? How the CK is that possible? No, this is quite wrong. The current situation made Chen Guang feel a little familiar. If he didn't remember wrongly, about a month or 2 ago, he had also encountered such an upside-down world on a plane. Many things have been reversed. At that time, Chen Guang had nearly broken down. Fortunately, this state didn't last long before he returned to normal. He never expected it to happen again. Furthermore, it was after the world fusion. Does this mean it's going to be like this in the future? Isn't this a little inappropriate? Also, what's my brother's name? What does he look like? Why don't I have any impression of him at all? Did I get it wrong somewhere? 15 minutes later, looking at Fan Lingshan, who was sitting at the same table and eating, Chen Guang felt like he didn't even have enough blood to vomit. Just now, my dad, okay, Mom, was referring to Fan Lingshan as the big brother. On second thought, it didn't seem wrong. She was originally his younger sister, but she became his brother after the world turned upside down. According to the old world's timeline, it should be winter break now. Fan Lingshan should have returned to her hometown for winter break not long after she finished her final exams in the first semester of her senior year. In fact, Chen Guang really wanted to ask if Fan Lingshan's surname was Fan or Chun, but he was afraid that he would anger his parents to tears. Is there really an elder brother in this world who can forget his younger sister's surname? Therefore, he suppressed the matter and only called out Lingshan's name. After the meal, he was dragged to tutor Fan Lingshan. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chen Guang saw her surname on her workbook. It was not Fan or Chun, but Hua Lingshan. Chen Guang was confused again, but he didn't dare to ask. He could only blame the world for changing too quickly, to the point where his brain could not react at all. He could also blame the heavenly Holy Grail for changing the entire world, but he, who had fallen into the space-time rift, was the only one who had been forgotten. Tutor or anything that didn't exist. He couldn't be a tutor for the rest of his life. When he flipped open the mathematics textbook in front of him and saw that it was Chinese, he immediately broke down. He tried to look at the teaching materials again and found that he was no match for them at all. Even the literal meaning of the words written on it was completely opposite. If he opened his mouth, he would be exposed. After making a casual joke, Chen Guang ran out of the room in pain. After coming out, Chen Guang did not dare to communicate with others. Instead, he ran straight out of the house and wandered on the street. At the same time, he took out his phone to check his contact list. After discovering that the names in his phone had not changed, he felt a little more at ease. In addition, he tried to circulate his inner strength without any problems. His martial arts skills were still there. Then, he tried the special ability of the earth paste exploder and quietly condensed a palm-sized stone in his palm. The special ability was also present. All right, now that the most basic abilities were on him, there was nothing left to be afraid of. But after eavesdropping on the people bargaining in the market for a while, his mood became very bad again. They were clearly selling pork, but the buyer asked how much they were selling carrots for. He escaped with an incomparably sorrowful heart, and then he was severely injured in front of the county town's pier. The pier was supposed to be a bus terminal. If this continued, he would probably go crazy, right? In addition, Chen Guang could not determine the situation of Tianguang Group and Chengguang Environmental Protection. The contacts in his phone did not change, but it did not mean that their identities were the same as before. For example, Lin Jingwei might be a poor man, Bai Fan might be a rich young master, Yu Hong might be his own boss, and Lu Xiaoyang might be an unemployed gay man. In short, the people were still the same, but their identities might have changed. The most annoying thing was that he could not call them because of the disorder of logic. Otherwise, how could he speak? Am I your boss? Then the other side would reply, no, I am your boss. Then the question was, who was the boss? Chen Guang looked up at the sky and could not help but feel sad. Last time, there was a reason to return to normal, but this time, the whole world was saying goodbye to the old world and moving toward the new one. If this was always the case, then the rest of his life would be a little sad. Standing on the side of the road, looking at the various cars on the left, Chen Guang did not feel very good. Damn, if I'm not mistaken, the steering wheel is on the right side of the car. He took off his hat and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Chen Guang. At this moment, a scream came from not far away from him. He turned around and saw a few high school girls holding their palms and looking at him with infatuation. It seemed that his identity as a super online celebrity was still there, so Tianguang Group still existed. Hey, we are your idols. Your program a few days ago was amazing. The high school girl's next words made the smile on his face freeze. He waved his hand weakly. Thank you for the compliment. After saying that, he turned around and ran away. He did not want to talk to anyone at all because he found that his heart was in a mess again. This time, the reversal of logic seemed to be different from the last time. For example, the meaning of the words you and me did not change, but still brought him great inconvenience. When the sky turned dark, Chen Guang went home with a heavy heart and had his breakfast. He did not say much and went straight to his room to try to turn on the computer. He planned to read some current events or historical materials and try his best to understand the current situation of the whole world. But in less than 5 minutes, he completely broke down. With his current logical thinking, it was too difficult for him to connect with the whole world. Looking at the cup on the writing desk, Chun Guang sank his thoughts into it again. This time, Liuli was finally in it. She looked a little tired, and her mental state was not very good, but at least she could speak. Liuli, can you tell me what is going on now? Chun Guang stood in front of her and asked with his hands on his hips. As he spoke, his eyes kept wandering all over her body. The feather dress she was wearing had been slightly upgraded from a bikini to a piece of cloth. It was very much a new fashion of the next generation. Liuli raised her head and looked at him with shame. As you can see, your real world and the real world have completely merged. From now on, your real world is also considered one of the 9 special worlds in the Heavenly Holy Grail. But other than the fact that other people's logic has become chaotic, I don't feel any changes at all. That's because you were sent to the end of time and slept for too long. Your perception has become dull, and it will take a while for it to recover. As for the problem of logical confusion that you mentioned, that is the sequela of direct integration. Don't worry, it will slowly return to normal after a long time. Really? But those words, those books that have been printed, the sign on the bus station with the dock printed on it, and those cars with the steering wheel on the right, can they also return to normal? Liuli laughed mysteriously. Of course, but won't that be discovered? Liuli shrugged. You're thinking too much. It's like putting a fish into a basin of water and moving the basin from the living room to the kitchen. Will the fish know? When changes keep happening, everyone's memory and outlook on life will be constantly revised. Only you, the savior, can see this change as an outsider. In the eyes of others, there won't be any problems. Don't underestimate the power of the Heavenly Holy Grail. It can create planes, and, of course, it can also change planes. Then what should I do now? Eat and drink. If you don't want to talk to people, then talk less. Otherwise, find a quiet place to hide and wait for everything to return to normal before dealing with others. In addition, you have to be mentally prepared. There will be more things happening in the next few days. Eventually, you should be able to slowly reach a stable state. All right, I understand. Chun Guang nodded and asked again, is there still no movement from the deer fruit? God knows where she went. I don't know either. As Liuli spoke, she turned her head and looked in the direction where the deer fruit was originally standing. Her expression was rather disappointed. Chun Guang felt that ever since the Heavenly Holy Grail's drastic change, Liuli had also changed a lot. She was no longer filled with an unapproachable divine might like before. When she spoke and did things, her demeanor was more like that of the mortal world. In the past, although she spoke like an ordinary person, there was still a sense of aloofness in her bones. Now it was all gone. After coming out of the cup world, Chun Guang stood in front of the window again and looked at the people coming and going on the old street. He carefully felt the possible changes that Liuli had mentioned. There was a barber shop across the street, but the sign hanging on it was a Jie's hair growth house. It was a little intoxicating. Chun Guang pricked up his ears and concentrated his energy. He was able to distinguish the sounds coming from the hair growth house from the noisy street. The shampoo inside was introducing business to the customers and tricking them to apply for a card. It seemed that all barbershops in the world were the same. No matter what the name was, getting people to apply for a card was the same. The customer inside had already been tricked to the point of being tempted. While the two of them were chatting enthusiastically, Chun Guang, who was across the street, felt his eyes blur. Right under his eyes, the sign of Jie's hair growth house had unexpectedly turned into Jie's barber shop without any warning. The entire change process lasted for less than 1,000th of a second. It was completed in the blink of an eye. Then, the shampoo guy who was bragging about his business suddenly changed his words from hair growth house to bro. I'm not trying to brag, but our hairdresser skills are the best among all the barbershops in the county. I'm not trying to brag, but our hairdresser is the best among all the barbershops in the county. Applying for our card is affordable and reliable. If you apply for a card now, you can charge 200 renminbi and get 100 renminbi free. There won't be such an event next week. Chen Guang sucked in a cold breath. The shampoo didn't know that his consciousness and outlook on life had been completely changed at this moment. He didn't notice anything unusual at all. Chen Guang looked up at the bright moon that was slowly rising in the distance. He couldn't help but think that at this moment, it wasn't just the hairdresser who had been changed, but everyone in the world except himself. But no one noticed it. This situation reminded him of a conjecture he had seen a long time ago. Some people said that the human universe didn't really exist. It was simply the embodiment of virtual data. It was formed by the projection of two-dimensional data into a three-dimensional world. The entire universe was a huge flat surface. Otherwise, why would the Milky Way be flat? In fact, that was because there were real projections under the universe. All the rules in the universe were also set by humans. Many people, including Chen Guang, scoffed at this idea. Everyone was alive and well. How could it be data? Did it mean that they were playing online games? Especially after Chen Guang obtained the heavenly Holy Grail and walked through the small worlds like the world in the cup. He also saw the people in the cup trapped in the cage in the sea of time and the realm of true martial. He was even more certain that he was in the real world. But now his idea was shaken. Perhaps all of this was fake? Just like when he played the single-player game Legend of the Three Kingdoms, he used the Jinshan Ranger to modify Zhao Yun's martial power value to 99999. He could kill anyone with one slash. If the game character Zhao Yun was alive, would he know that his martial power value had been modified? Perhaps in his memory, his martial power value should have been this high from the beginning. Chapter 1226. Once this thought popped up in his mind, Chen Guang suddenly felt extremely terrified. If that was the case, could it be that he was also a fake? That everything was fake? But if I'm also fake, then what's real? Wait a minute. Two words suddenly popped up in Chen Guang's mind. Real. That's right, the real world. Wasn't it referring to the real existence? If everything in the past was an illusion, then now, should this be the process of evolving from illusion to reality? With this thought in mind, Chen Guang looked down at his hands again and clenched them tightly. The sense of reality that he had never felt before became exceptionally strong in his heart. But after the sense of reality, he felt exceptionally empty, as if everything was very illusory. It seemed that this was the case. In a sense, the world that he lived in before was also not a complete existence. There were still loopholes in the rules, just like how scientists' research on the wave-particle duality was sometimes correct and sometimes wrong. Regarding the changes of many particles in the microscopic world, it was still impossible to arrive at an accurate conclusion. Various uncertainty laws for elementary particles often appeared in many textbooks. In research, even the existence of these particles was still in an unstable state. Let's simply assume that if a person's body was made up of countless alpha and beta elementary particles, but after billions of molecules, these alpha and beta elementary particles will become gamma and delta elementary particles 1 second later. The real process might be billions of times more complicated than this, but the concept could be understood in this way. Then this meant that as a living life, the parts that made up the body would always be constantly shaking and changing. In other words, the person would still be the same person, but after billions of molecules 1 second later, this person would objectively become another person. This meant that everyone would always be reincarnating all the time, but they themselves would not be aware of it. Thinking about it this way, it was really frightening to think about it in detail. Therefore, according to Chen Guang's current judgment, it was very likely that after the real world and the real world were completely integrated, the original incomplete rules might be completed, and the microscopic particles that were always changing might truly stabilize. According to the speed of human progress, it might take at least hundreds of millions of years of reproduction and development to see that level. They would have to leave their footprints all over the universe and constantly improve their civilization level in the universe. Only then would they be able to use the power of science and technology to peel off the surface of the microscopic particles layer by layer, break through the shackles that the microscopic world could always be infinitely divided, and explore the truth bit by bit. Only then would they realize the truth of this change. But objectively speaking, that was what happened. Now that the worlds had fused, when the microscopic fundamental particles had completely stabilized and were magnified to the macroscopic level visible to the naked eye, and then to the entire Earth, the entire solar system, or perhaps the entire universe, there would also be an invisible fundamental change. A stable world is a real world. In addition, if one tried to understand it from the level of life and soul, they might be able to deduce it in this way. The incomplete world was actually an illusory world. In such a world, the soul was often in a state of closed circulation. After a person died, there would be reincarnation. Although Chun Guang had never died, no one knew if the world after death really existed, and no one had ever been able to prove whether reincarnation was real or not. But according to everything he knew now, he deduced two possibilities. Humans did indeed have souls, and after death, they could indeed be reincarnated. The many legends and myths left by the ancients had already shown their thoughts on this. The people of Huaxia described it as the underworld and the heavenly court. The Hindu Stani Buddhists described it as the afterlife of cultivation, and the Christians described it as heaven and hell. In short, different regions would have different ways of thinking, but the essential meaning was the same. It was just that with the further development of science and technology, people chose to believe in science again and question this theological or metaphysical theory. But science and theology, in a sense, were different approaches to achieve the same result. When a scientific theory advanced to various uncertain laws, whether humans were really alive or not was already a metaphysical topic. After all, the human body was also composed of hydrocarbons, molecules, atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons, and even more subtle core particles that could only exist for a very short period of time. The material that made up the body was forever changing. Only the soul that the body carried could be eternal. However, the price of eternity was that every time one died, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, even if one was reincarnated, the memory of one's previous life would completely disappear. In this way, even if the soul was continued, the life at a certain stage had completely died. The soup of Meng Po was a speculation in the ancient Huaxia legends, and it did not really exist. But it was an unquestionable fact that the soul carried by an unstable body could not be continued. This kind of reincarnation and rebirth was no different from real death. Another possibility was that after a person died, they did not really disappear, but turned into another kind of life in the form of a soul life, or in the form of an energy life, and continued to live in this universe. But after the real world and the real world merged, what would the world or the universe look like? Chun Guang crossed his legs and sat on the chair, fiddling with the world map that he found in his hands. His mind was completely open to thinking about these questions. After the fusion, would everyone remember the things of their previous life after resurrection? But this was no different from the lower realms like the transient sea and the realm of true martial. Those who were trapped inside would instead feel that it was a cage. It's the space and channel for ascension. At this moment, Liuli's voice sounded in his heart. This divine emperor had unconsciously started to pry into his thoughts again. Chun Guang asked, "Channel for ascension? Can you say it more clearly? In this world of yours, isn't there a story like this? It said that Laozi rode a green bull out of Hangu Pass, and then the purple aura came from the east and ascended to immortality. Or it's like what is written in some martial arts novels, where someone trained his martial arts to the realm of great success and finally broke through the void. Or perhaps someone has cultivated enough merit and is ranked among the immortals." Liuli appeared to be exceptionally patient as she explained. Chun Guang was surprised. Could it be that these are all true? Fake, Liuli replied without hesitation. Chun Guang's face was full of pain. Then why did you say it? Liuli snorted. But we can't deny the wisdom of the ancients. although their knowledge was not as good as you modern people. In terms of thinking, they were more imaginative and free. These myths and legends that you know are indeed the arrogant imagination of these ancients when they were thinking about life and death. But in a sense, they had indeed peeped into the next stage of thinking. It's a pity that they were not born in a good era. Even if they figured out the key points, they still couldn't jump out of the shackles of the rules. It's just like how they can see the moon when they look up, but they can never go up. Chen Guang said unwillingly, but now humans can land on the moon. Liuli snorted. That's right. Now that the real world has merged with your real world, then your world has begun to become complete. So life in this universe has a channel for ascension. But isn't this the world in a cup? Where can it go? Chen Guang asked. Liuli thought for a while. Although the ordinary world in a cup is a world that was created, the real world, as one of the special worlds, has existed from the beginning in my memory. It's not that simple. As for how far it can go, in my opinion, there is only one possibility. As she spoke, Liuli's image gradually became clear in Chen Guang's mind. Her finger was pointing at the sky. Chen Guang looked up blankly, but only saw the ceiling. But a word suddenly burst out in his mind. Endless heavenly realm. That's right. Every single person, no, every single life. I don't know about that. I'm just guessing. Why don't you try killing someone? I can't talk to anyone after I kill them. I don't know the answer either. And why would I kill someone for no reason? Chapter 12:27. Then there's no other way. You'll find out when you die one day. Don't you look forward to it? Liuli teased him with a wicked sense of humor. Chen Guang actually seriously considered this question for about 10 seconds and finally came to a very depressing conclusion. In his current state, wanting to die was millions of times more difficult than wanting to live well. Say, why are you so unlucky? It's hard to want to die, but it's also hard to live. If there really is a past life in this life, you must have been a rotten person in your previous life. Otherwise, you wouldn't have suffered such retribution in this life. Shut up. Goodbye. Chen Guang decided to ignore Liuli. At the same time, he found that the world map in front of him had changed in the blink of an eye. What the hell did the world map change? This was not just a simple picture. This meant that the terrain of the entire Earth had changed. Right before his eyes, the North and South America on the world map had been completely separated into two lumps. This was not the end. Africa and Europe were not separated, and there was no Mediterranean Sea. They were collectively called non-European continents. Then in this world's online slang, there must be no titles such as European Emperor and Unlucky Emperor. The archipelago of South Asia was completely connected to Oceania. The sea level between Asia and Oceania was smooth, with only a few small islands dotted with stars. The Bering Strait between Asia and South America was widened. Alaska no longer existed, but was flattened and pressed on South America. In addition, Chen Guang found that he was originally in Japan, but now the long and narrow island of Japan was also gone. It was completely connected to the mainland of China. As for the peninsula under the rooster's head of China, it also did not exist. Looking at the territory of China, which was at least a quarter larger than the 9.6 million square kilometers in his memory, Chen Guang was speechless for a long time. Not only that, the original messy names of the countries on the world map had also been rearranged. Chen Guang looked carefully for a while and slowly confirmed one thing. The number of countries seemed to have changed. Some countries no longer existed, such as the island countries, but there were some countries that he had never heard of. The overall number had decreased slightly. Silently putting down the map, Chen Guang turned his head to look out the window. His mind was a mess. This kind of operation was too overbearing, too king good at playing. At this moment, someone knocked on his door. Chen Guang looked down at the time. Before he knew it, it was already 11:30. Chen Guang, are you inside? I was eating barbecued meat outside just now, so I brought some back for your supper. The barbecue in Lilai County could be said to be the best in the entire province. Other than being a little too expensive, there was no other problem. Chen Guang also hadn't eaten for a long time. He felt that it would be good to eat some barbecued meat at such a special time to calm his nerves. So he opened the door and asked, "Mom, why are you still eating barbecue outside at this time?" Chun Guli gave him a backhand smack on the forehead. "Did you take the wrong medicine? Since when did I become your mom?" Chen Guang felt tired. It was really hard for him to live. Taking the barbecue wrapped in foil from his father, Chen Guang asked casually, "Is my sister asleep? Why don't we ask her to get up and eat some?" Chen Guli flicked him again. "What, your sister? That's your brother." Chen Guang wanted to slap himself to death. "If I say another word, I'll be a fool." But he couldn't help it. "By the way, Dad, why don't we go to Japan as a family someday?" This time, Chen Guli didn't knock him on the forehead. He just looked confused. "Japan? What is that place?" Chen Guang looked at his father's completely confused expression and immediately confirmed his thoughts. Sure enough, in the world that had been completed, Japan had never existed from the beginning. Looking down at the Liaodong province written on the map, Chen Guang finally accepted this cruel reality for a certain country. That, since it had become a part of China's territory, could the teachers still film? "Pervert's brother, I'm sorry. I'm a sinner for all eternity. Teachers, there's no more." His father couldn't stand Chen Guang's various mental disorders anymore. He scolded him a few more words and told him to quickly eat the barbecue while it was still hot. Then, he returned to the master bedroom. Chen Guang took the hot barbecue back to the desk and sat in front of the computer with a pained expression. He took out the state of mind of going to the execution ground and opened the magnetic link search website that he had used countless times in his browser's favorites folder. He entered a few mysterious codes that he was familiar with by heart. Teach you 78123, HKO 13985, etc. Actually, they were all there. He was simply stunned. Then, with the mood of a pilgrimage, he quickly downloaded the treasure behind these mysterious codes into the network disk. Then he locked the bedroom door out of habit to prevent his parents from suddenly breaking in at the critical moment. Then, he clicked on the main film with great excitement. It was still the familiar face, the familiar plot, the familiar expression, the familiar fountain and whatnot. But there was one big difference. The people inside were speaking Chinese. Chen Guang and his friends were simply stunned. His friends were even so frightened that they vomited. After a violent convulsion, Chen Guang suddenly felt that everything had become so calm. There was even a feeling of enlightenment in his mind that he had seen through the world of mortals. He really didn't expect that as an old driver with many female confidants, he would easily fall under the pomegranate skirt of the teachers after so many days. It really couldn't be blamed for his poor willpower. As a good Chinese youth who thrived under the influence of many teachers in the past, he felt that the infantry war history with Chinese subtitles was simply an extravagant hope and the greatest enjoyment in the world. After he became a language master, although there was no obstruction in listening to Japanese, Chinese people still preferred domestic high-quality selfies. There was no other way. Domestic was the best. However, domestic was often not good enough. It was either shoddy production, or the artist's looks were really not good enough for the audience, or the quality of the photography equipment was low, or the lighting was so dim that it made people's hair stand on end. Then, the lines were very bad, and the faces were either mosaic or mask, which greatly affected the user's experience. Now that he suddenly saw an infantry war film in Chinese, how could Chen Guang not be shocked? But after he calmed down, he felt strange. This was very unreasonable. Since Liaodong province belonged to the territory of China, of course, it should abide by China's policies. How could it develop such an immoral industry? There was no reason for the old men in Beijing to be so open-minded, right? With such doubts in mind, Chen Guang silently clicked on the modern history, and after reading it briefly, he understood what was going on. Fortunately, as the world continued to change, the logical relations gradually returned to normal. Although it was a little difficult to understand, Chen Guang still managed to read it with difficulty. The times were different, really different. In addition, Liaodong province was just an abbreviation, and the full name should be Liaodong Special Administrative Region. In the modern history, Liaodong's special administrative region had been separated from the territory of China for a short time, because during the Qing dynasty, China signed a territorial cession treaty with the United States, completely ceding this territory. A few years later, with the support of the United States, this area was established, and it was called the State of the Beginning of the Sun, meaning the rising of the sun. Ahem. In short, after the Second World War, the State of the Beginning of the Sun, as a defeated country, completely lost its sovereignty in front of the furious China. Political, economic, military, and other aspects were completely controlled by China. In 1978, when the 200-year territorial cession treaty signed by China and the United States expired, it was decisively taken back, renamed as Liaodong's Special Administrative Region, and began to fully popularize Chinese. Of course, this territory had been separated from the territory of China for too long, and it had been deeply invaded by European and American culture, forming a social, economic, and culture that was completely different from the Orthodox Chinese. In order to take back this land, the predecessors of the old masters also gave the Liaodong Special Administrative Region great autonomy, and the tradition of love-action martial arts fighting was developed. But on the surface, it was prohibited to flow to other areas. Of course, that was the #1 driving force of human technological progress. People in the old world could rack their brains to come up with all kinds of special effects across the coastline, and they could not be prevented despite repeated prohibitions. Magnetic links, BT torrents, web disks, Q groups, WeChat, Weibo, and so on, there was nothing that could not be done. Now that it had become one of their own, it was even more explosive when it spread. Moreover, like the original Japan, the infantry war discipline was still illegal in the Liaodong Special Administrative Region, but it could be distributed overseas, and of course, it was very easy to export it and sell it domestically. Those who understood would naturally understand. In short, under this series of changes, this rather special situation was created. In addition, looking at the whole world, the changes in the Liaodong Special Administrative Region were still just a drop in the ocean. There were differences in the historical evolution of countries all over the world. Unfortunately, it was still a little difficult to read the article. After figuring out the problem that he was most concerned about, Chen Guang turned off the computer and went to bed. No matter how important the matter was, he would wait until tomorrow to read it. The next morning, Chen Guang woke up early. In order to prevent his father from talking to him and accidentally saying something wrong and getting his head smacked, Chen Guang decisively went out and asked for a private VIP room in the internet cafe outside. Because he had a straight face, although the cafe manager recognized him, he did not dare to disturb him. As a hometown native, although Chen Guang was still a well-known celebrity, there was not much mystery in Lalai County. In fact, the owner of the internet cafe was 2 years older than Chen Guang in high school, and he had some dealings with Chen Guang when he was studying. Another night passed, and his view of the world became more normal. Day was still day, and night became night again. Chen Guang read the article more easily. After spending the whole day in the internet cafe, Chen Guang walked out shaking his head in disappointment. He had suffered a lot. He never thought that under the new worldview, the world's most powerful country in technology and military was not the United States, but Huaxia. Now, it was acting as the world's policeman, maintaining world peace everywhere. The world's first GDP and the world's 7th GDP per capita were all from Huaxia. The world's first PC processor design, manufacturing, and production company was not Intel, nor was it an agricultural company, but a Chinese company established in Yinjing's Zhongguancun by Huaxia people. The one with the most aircraft carriers, the most advanced tanks, the most advanced metallurgical manufacturing industry, and the most advanced precision manufacturing industry was not the United States or Germany, but Huaxia. The reason for this difference in nature began in 1850. The complete destruction of the Qing dynasty happened decades earlier than in the history of the Old World. In the most critical decades, a group of reformists briefly established a parliamentary dynasty that ruled China. It was called the Hua dynasty. In the crucial Second Industrial Revolution, the Huaxia dynasty worked hard to catch up, It continued to make progress that was left behind in the past few hundred years of seclusion. It also brought into full play the deep-rooted creativity and constructiveness of the Chinese people. Although there was still a gap between them and the European and American powers, they could at least see the tale of others. When the Second World War broke out, the well-prepared Huaxia was far from as weak as it looked. The Old World fought a long war for 15 years. In the history of the New World, the war lasted less than 4 years. The United States of Japan was dumbfounded by the Shenanjia Plan by the two big bullets codenamed Dongjua and by Qi. They decisively raised the white flag. After that, they were completely liberated and the new Huaxia Republic was officially established. They used the nuclear power in their hands to frantically plunder resources and technology from all over the world. The overall national strength of the Huaxia Republic was estimated to have caught up with the United States around 1985, and since then, it has surpassed them. Today, apart from being the leader in various fields of science and technology, the most typical example was that the high-speed rail in Huaxia could run stably at 400 kilometers per hour without any safety accidents. The average speed of the high-speed rail in the world, Germany, was not even 250 kilometers per hour. The gap was obvious. Construction was an innate ability of the Chinese people. We Chinese could even do farming in Africa. It was also because of the rapid pace of globalization. Otherwise, with the ability of the Huaxia people, they could even recover to the extent of the Han and Tang dynasties, where the GDP of a country was more than that of all the other countries in the world combined. In addition, there was also a huge difference in the long river of history. For example, there were many differences in the poems and songs that have been passed down from ancient times to the present. In the history of the New World, there are also the existence of Li Bai and Du Fu. However, these two poets were not as down and out as the two in the Old World. Instead, they had ascended to the top. Li Bai was the assistant minister of the Ministry of War of the Tang Dynasty, and Du Fu was the minister of the Ministry of Rights. They were busy with government affairs and military affairs all day long. How could they have the time to recite poems? These two were just typical representatives. There were many similar situations. Many of the people who left their names in history had overlapping names, but their achievements and fields were like heaven and earth. The later lord of southern Tang, Liu, was not a subjugated monarch. After him, southern Tang lasted for nearly 100 more years. Then, hundreds of years later, Du Mu could not have written a sentence like, "The merchant girl did not know the hatred of a subjugated country." Across the river, she sang the flower of the backyard. This was the butterfly effect. Liu did not subjugate his country, and his jade tree backyard flower did not become the infamous sound of a subjugated country. Du Mu also could not have written the poem Wandering in the Qinhuai River to satirize the later lord of southern Tang. But correspondingly, while history had lost some pearls, it had left behind some golden sentences. In the history of the New World, there were also poetry immortals and poetry saints, but they were not Li Bai and Du Fu, but two other people. The artistic achievements and attainments of these two people were not much worse than the original two. It was just that the essays and poems they wrote were different, and their life experiences were different. However, these things were too far away. Although it seemed shocking, it did not have much of an impact on Chen Guang's life. There were many that were more recent, and they had a great impact on him. Through the evolution of history, Chen Guang was also closely related to something else. For example, many of the classic songs and martial arts novels that had been popular in the past few decades, such as Battle Break, The Grave Robbers Chronicles, and other well-known web novels did not appear. Even the lousy web novelist called Thing in the Fire that Chen Guang had been following had disappeared. The book that he had bookmarked on Qidian's network had become a huge scammer by the name of Shui Patian. This was simply toxic. He gave up after reading less than 3 chapters. F***CK, this scammer author was just like his name. He really wanted to break the heavens. In the old world, writers of this level should not even have the courage to upload their works, let alone sign a contract. The most infuriating thing was that this guy called Shui Patian was very popular, at least 10,000 subscriptions. How easy were the people in the new world to be satisfied? I can make countless people kneel and lick my legend of the evil god, right? Forget it, the old man did not lack money, so there was no need for him to be a plagiarist. Chen Guang shook his head as he returned home. When he entered the door, he saw Hua Lingshan. Student Lingshan called out sweetly, "Brother, come and eat." Chen Guang's eyes were filled with tears. "Brother, you finally call me brother." Chapter 1228. Oh, okay. Back at the dining table, Chen Guang still didn't dare to say much, but Chen Guoli didn't give him a chance. He said happily, "Today, your mom cooked personally. Why don't you comment on the taste?" Chen Guang thought about it again and decided to muster up the courage to give a thumbs up. "The taste is great." Then Feng Rong, Chen Guoli, and Hua Lingshan's expressions changed at the same time. Feng Rong looked embarrassed. "I know you often eat good food outside. You look down on your mom's cooking." Chen Guang silently turned his face away. His heart was tired, really tired. After 4 or 5 days, everything that Chen Guang was familiar with finally slowly returned to the right track. Although the world's politics, economy, history, and geography had changed, at least he didn't have to be careful when communicating. He was afraid that he would do something that violated common sense, and say something that violated common sense. Seeing that everything had settled down, Chen Guang was ready to leave Lilai County for the time being. Now that he had enjoyed a rare vacation, it was time to return to Wujing. Whether it was the Guangding General Administration, the Tianguang Group, or Zhuo Jingxi, who had just returned to China with the photocatalyst products, they were all waiting for him in Wujing. Now, although he was still a fourth-year student, his special experience had created a special life for him. Except for the final exam and graduation oral defense, he had nothing in common with ordinary college students. Because he was inexplicably teleported back by the turbulence of time and space, he didn't leave a car in the county. He didn't have the luxury of going to the county's 4S store to buy a car when he returned to Wujing. He also felt that it would be too troublesome to have someone pick him up from Wujing. So, he simply got up early the next day, put on a cap, sunglasses, mask, and scarf, went straight to the station, bought a bus ticket, and took the bus back to Wujing. Ever since Chen Guang made a name for himself, he couldn't remember how long it had been since he last took a bus. Needless to say, it was a very special experience. Curling up in the bus, he took out his phone and began to fiddle with it, watching the news. For him, everything in the outside world was new. The whole world had changed, but he was the only one who retained his memories of the past. This was an indescribable feeling. It was as if he had transmigrated to a parallel dimension, but the people around him were still the same people. Faced with this situation, Chen Guang had a feeling that he was the only sober person in the world. His mind contained another world, but the minds of others contained a whole new world. No one knew about the various epics that had appeared in the past. The ancient books passed down by the ancients, the crystallization of the ancestors' wisdom, had all become stories that Chen Guang could only enjoy in his memory. The people in the New World might have similar stories in their memories, but they were fundamentally different from what Chen Guang knew. Along the way, Chen Guang fiddled with his phone while listening to the other passengers on the bus. The news in front of his eyes and the things that others were talking about were half unfamiliar to him, and the other half were familiar to him. Things that Chen Guang was familiar with, such as the Chinese football team's daily defeat and their failure to break through the World Cup qualifiers. Yes, the national football team was indeed the national football team. Do not have any expectations for them. Even if the world was destroyed, they would still be stable. However, others said that the group of people who played football did not know how to follow the example of the Chinese men's basketball team. Look at the Chinese men's basketball team, which was ranked in the top 3 in the world. At this moment, Chen Guang was dumbfounded. Didn't Yao Ming retire? Why did the Chinese men's basketball team become so strong? Unless the old man personally participated, it might not be possible, right? Of course, if there was someone like the old man who could shoot anywhere he wanted, this kind of sport would probably not be a problem for other countries. This thought flashed in Chen Guang's mind for a moment, but he dismissed it on the spot. With his ability, participating in this kind of competitive sport was too much of a bully. To him, there was no sense of accomplishment. After a while, the people on the bus started talking about the variety show that was popular around the world a few days ago. It was God of Joy, which Chen Guang personally starred in. Chen Guang quickly put down his phone and pricked up his ears. As these people chatted, all they said was that Almighty Superman was really awesome, really strong, and that his combat power was really off the charts. Chen Guang felt that it was only natural. Are you kidding me? I can even pull a high-speed rail with my bare hands, and you guys are still not licking my boots. At that moment, the content of the conversation between two people in front of him made him feel exceptionally puzzled. Which monster do you think is the strongest? As one of them chatted, he suddenly lowered his voice to a volume that only the person sitting next to him could hear. I think the black and white impermanence in the labyrinth is the strongest. I don't think so. I think those mosquitoes are fiercer, and they even have growth attributes. Speaking of which, I really envy Almighty Superman, an S-rank player. If he had not personally released this video, we wouldn't even know that he had actually become an S-rank god. Actually, everyone has been guessing this for a long time, but he did not take the initiative to say it, and we can't ask him. What if he is not a player? What should we do? Of course, with the abilities he has displayed in the real world, it is only natural that he has the strength of an S rank in the game. But I don't quite understand. Since he is already so strong, why we never encountered him in the game? Isn't that simple? He is an S rank, and we are just E rank noobs. There is no way we can enter his map, right? Come to think of it, the other players who entered the game with Almighty Brother did not seem to have made any moves. These people have all reached C rank in the end, right? I really envy them for having such a good life. If it were a normal newbie, they would not have received such treatment. Who knows how many times they would have died. These people are practically leveling up while lying down. After becoming players, we have already entered 3 missions, but we are still stuck at E rank. The voices of these two people were extremely low. Not only that, as they spoke, a special barrier appeared beside them, completely blocking the hearing of the other people on the bus. The other people on the bus were talking about the computer special effects in the later parts of God of Joy. However, these two people were talking about the same thing from completely different perspectives. Chen Guang, on the other hand, could clearly hear their conversation. However, he could only feel his scalp going numb. His mind was filled with 1,000 black question marks. What the hell is this? What are they playing at? If I did not hear wrongly, they seem to be talking about something that happened in a massacre world. But how could they know? It sounds like these scenes happened in God of Joy. But how is that possible? Also game? Players? S rank? E rank? What is this? The two youngsters sitting in the first few rows are also players? And they have already completed 3 missions? Suppressing the indescribable shock in his heart, Chen Guang was finally willing to open his mobile phone and open the high. My God! In the 4th episode, he directly skipped to the latter half and finished watching the special effects that Chu Zijin had added. Then, he touched his forehead, his heart filled with confusion. There were too many YS in his heart. In fact, there was someone who could answer him now. It was not just one person, but an entire organization. If the world knew that the only true S-rank player in the world, the Minister of Heaven of China's strongest awakened organization, Chen Guang, was actually so surprised that there really were games and players in this world, countless people would probably laugh their heads off. The chat between the two people in front had not ended. If I had known, I would have watched this show earlier. The Almighty Superman has shown us a whole new realm. Now, I have more confidence in surviving in the game. I think so too. Maybe what prompted him to show the video was that we humans have been at a disadvantage recently. Our morale is low, and we can't even raise our heads after being beaten by the Protoss. Now, we know that there is actually such an expert among us. Is he going to lead the human race to blow the horn of counterattack? Speaking of which, we are all players. Why do we have so many taboos? We absolutely cannot reveal our identity to ordinary people, but he has done it well. He directly brought what happened in the game to a variety show. I've already said, us E-rank noobs shouldn't try to figure out the realm of the legendary S-rank powerhouses. Apart from himself, everything about S-rank can only be guessed. That's true. Maybe after surpassing A-rank, he can break away from the shackles of the game. I really envy him. Right now, we feel like we're walking in the dark in brocade clothes. It's so uncomfortable. It's good enough that we can continue to live. Being chosen by the game is also our fate. It's not like we've gained nothing, right? It's just that we can't bear to use our reward points to exchange for money. Otherwise, we would have been rich long ago. That's right. Those with weak minds have all been reset. So I look at these people in the car. They don't even know that the reason they can live peacefully is because of us, the poor chosen ones, carrying the burden for them. The two of them did not know that the almighty Superman they had been talking about all this while was sitting in the second to last row behind them with his neck shrunk. He was so shocked by their conversation that he did not want to say a word. At the same time, Chen Guang was also baffled. He had no idea what caused this. If what they said was true, why didn't anyone contact him for the past few days after releasing such an important piece of information on the variety show? In the setting of the new world, what did I tell the people from the general administration of Guangding and the Tianguan group before I came back? He was a little regretful. If he had known, he would have called the people in his address book earlier. Otherwise, he would not have been so lost now. However, after thinking about it, he decided to forget it. It was not very clear to talk over the phone. With the previous state, he was afraid that they would not be able to communicate. He would talk face-to-face when he returned to Wujing. As Chen Guang thought about this, he raised his head and looked out of the car window. At this moment, there were still countless threads of faith points that others could not see slowly surging over from all over the world. The heavenly holy grail in his bag began to tremble slightly. Chen Guang picked up the grail and looked down at it. At this time, my strongest physical idol is about to be born? Finally. Chapter 1229. As he sensed something, his mind was involuntarily pulled into the world within the cup. On one of the 3,000 high platforms on the city walls of Cloud City, a tall and mighty stone statue slowly rose from the platform. This stone statue was the appearance of Chen Guang himself. His upper body was bare, and the muscles on his arms were like coiled snakes. The contours of his abdominal and back muscles were equally clear. Although Chen Guang's physique was not as sturdy as the bodybuilders outside. If a true martial arts expert were to see his muscles, he might be able to understand why he was worthy of being called the world's #1 expert, and why he could become the most powerful martial saint in history. Although the muscles on his upper body were not overly strong, if one looked closely, every line, every piece, and every inch were perfect to the point of being impeccable. He was simply a perfect work of art. Not long after, the upper half of the stone statue was fully revealed. Just the upper half alone was more than 2,000 feet tall. The eyes and brows of the stone statue looked vivid and lifelike, full of heroic spirit, elegant and unrestrained, comparable to Pan and charming all living beings. The latter half of the sentence was all Chen Guang's own adjectives. In short, although they were both human statues, his strongest physical statue was clearly walking a completely different path from the previous acting statue. One could be classified as a little fresh meat, while the other was a standard man. You brat, your luck is pretty good. You even got lucky this time. Lioli, who was standing in the middle of Cloud City, also turned to look at the stone statue and teased. Chen Guang asked, "What do you mean? If it was still your previous world, it would have been almost impossible for you to get your hands on this statue. Now that the worlds have merged, it's a blessing in disguise for you." Chen Guang only needed to think for a moment. Combining it with what the two players in the car said, he understood immediately. Regardless of why the events in the slaughtering world would appear in the form of special effects in God of Happiness, regardless of whether there were these scenes or not, he would still only obtain the recognition of a small number of people. There would still be many people who would regard the ancients as unsurpassable gods in their minds. There were also some people who, no matter how realistic a variety show was, would always look at it with doubtful eyes. Others might say that variety shows were like reality shows, and they all had a script. At most, the script of the almighty Superman was more shameless, played more shamelessly, and produced a crazier effect. For example, when he pulled the high-speed rail with his bare hands, it was very likely that there were other auxiliary forces. How can a normal human do that? Due to Chen Guang's long-term good reputation, those who held this view were definitely the minority. But no matter what, this would definitely affect the degree of his recognition, and thus affect the achievement of the conditions for the statue of God. Previously, although he was famous enough, and there was nothing wrong with the attention, even if the last half of the fantasy scene was excluded, the audience still held two different views. Those who approved of him and those who disapproved of him clashed with each other. Now, there were more players in this world who knew what was good for them. They did not hesitate to believe that the special effects footage was real, and they were excited because of his sudden exposure as an S-rank player. Players were different from ordinary people. They had experienced many life and death trials, and their understanding of personal strength was on another level. After struggling in the test of life and death, the players' admiration and worship for the strong was far beyond that of ordinary people. Just like during the war, the reason why ancient generals were often praised for their bravery and courage was precisely because in such a special environment, only the strong could move freely on the battlefield. Those who could go through many wars without dying and make a name for themselves until the end were all true powerhouses. They first left behind their deeds, and then were praised by the world. With the spread of the word, the bravery of these generals would naturally be exaggerated, and they would often be 8 feet tall, and their weapons would weigh hundreds of kilograms. Right now, Chen Guang was also facing the same situation. Aside from him, no one had come into contact with the realm of S-rank players. Even if they had watched the video, they wouldn't be able to experience it personally. Therefore, they wouldn't be able to know the exact strength of the S-rank players. When the players speculated about his combat power in their minds, they would more or less exaggerate it, further causing the players' worship of him to become even stronger. With these people's blind worship piling up, it suddenly became the last straw that broke the camel's back, helping him to successfully achieve the trigger condition of the strongest physical statue of God. That's true, but it's still a pity. Chen Guang sighed. While chatting with Liu Li, he was multitasking at the same time, focusing his attention on the newly born, strongest physical body colossus. The giant statue was still slowly growing up like a spring bud that had just been unearthed. In the time it took to say 2 sentences, the giant statue's waist had completely grown out, and its inverted triangular abdominal muscles were very attractive. Kid, you didn't train your muscles for nothing. Even among the gods in the endless divine realm, there are only a few who have a perfect physical body like yours. Azure teased. Do gods also need a physical body? Are all the gods in the endless divine realm in human form? Chen Guang was subconsciously concerned about this issue. That's not necessarily true. Some gods don't have a physical body, just like the elemental creatures you once saw. In the endless divine realm, there are many different forms of existence that have god-level power. Of course, the most powerful gods would often constantly modify their own bodies in order to obtain more power. In the long history of the endless divine realm, everyone finally reached a consensus. Chen Guang asked, "What consensus?" Azure said very calmly, "The human form with 1 head, 2 arms, 1 waist, and 2 legs is the perfect form with the strongest combat power in this world." Chen Guang was shocked. That can't be right. Why do I feel like the tentacle monster is a little stronger? The reason you think so must be because your imagination has been eroded by too long of a life. Go to hell. I'm not joking with you. Okay. Let's assume that what you said is true for now. By the way, what's with you, Ting? You seem to know him? Since they were talking about the endless divine realm, Chen Guang happened to remember this matter and quickly asked. Azure nodded. He's very strong. Hearing those words, Chen Guang instantly became spirited and asked, "And then, that's all? Don't you know what happened next?" "He controls the power of lightning. Oh, and one more thing. He's one of the top 10 god emperors in the endless divine realm. He's slightly stronger than I am." Chen Guang expressed his shock. "Is he really that powerful? But I feel that he looks very weak in the slaughtering world." "That's because he's only a projection that's suppressed by the heavenly Holy Grail. But I feel like he doesn't have the bearing of an expert. He can't make people fear him at all. 10 god emperors? It's like selling cabbages on the street." Azure suddenly shouted, "That's because you're naturally immune to it. Is that so? I'm that strong? I'm that talented?" As the two of them were chatting, a section of the deity statue's body unknowingly popped out. The root of its thigh also started to pop out. Then, the look in Azure's eyes started to change. Chen Guang was also slightly embarrassed. "So the strongest physical body must only have a physical body? It's fine if my upper body is bare, but what about my pants? F***ck me. Why is the lower half of my body also bare?" Looking at this huge stone statue with its bare buttocks, Chen Guang felt a little embarrassed in the depths of his heart. "Damn it, what's going on in your head all day long?" Azure cursed. Then, she said, "Why aren't you changing the deity statue's image?" The deity statue's head was already almost at the knee position. Chen Guang lowered his head to look at his lower body. He thought to himself, "This heavenly holy grail is really a roundworm in my stomach." Not only is the face and the contours of the muscles exactly the same as the real person, even the capital of the lower body is done to perfection. Even the blood vessels and tendons on it are cough cough. Forget it. I'd better change my appearance quickly. Fortunately, the deity statue still has the right to change its image once. Immediately after, Chen Guang raised his arms and shouted. At the same time, he gave the order in his heart, "Put on my clothes." As his voice fell, the huge stone statue's upper body, which had already reached a height of nearly 300 meters, rapidly expanded. What was put on was the casual clothes that he was currently wearing. Azure turned her head and pointed at the deity statue. She looked like she wanted to strangle Chen Guang to death. "Are you poisonous?" Chen Guang slapped his forehead. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. The deity statue continued to pop up. Clothes were also put on, but there were no pants. "It's not that I'm poisonous. It's the heavenly holy grail that tricked me. How would I know that when I said clothes, it would really only give clothes? Most of the time, when we say clothes, isn't it just clothes and pants together? You're silly. You don't know how to express yourself clearly. With the strictness of the heavenly holy grail, if you say clothes, it will definitely only give clothes. Forget it. Now that things have come to this, there's no other way." Chen Guang shrugged. Anyway, every deity statue only had one chance to change its form. Since it was wasted like this, it could only be said that it was fate. He decisively decided to accept his fate. Anyway, looking at himself, he would slowly get used to it. The appearance of wearing thick winter casual clothes on the upper body and bare buttocks on the lower body made the level and temperament of the most powerful deity statue, which was supposed to be incomparably noble and sacred, suddenly lower by a lot. "You'll regret it. You'll definitely regret it." Azure turned her face away. She didn't want to look at that damned statue anymore. She turned her head and said meaningfully, but very angrily, "Don't bother about those details. Have you seen David's statue? This is called art, understand? What's there to regret? Anyway, there's no one else here other than you and me. I don't even know where Deercry has run off to." Chen Guang chuckled. He could only put on an expression as if a dead pig was not afraid of boiling water. At the same time, he started to check the production of faith in his heart. He wouldn't know if he didn't check, but after checking, he got a huge shock. What was placed in front of him was a huge surprise. The production of faith in this strongest deity statue was off the charts. Currently, the maximum production of the middle realm deity statue of the Spirit Heavenly Cup was over 54,000, while the production of the one-line sky was over 540,000. According to his previous production, He only needed to gather one more middle realm deity statue of the spirit heavenly cup to pass the test. The debt of over 1 billion faith points that he had on his back could be paid off within 2 years. However, it was very obvious that the strongest deity statue of the middle realm deity statue of the spirit heavenly cup had completely surpassed the standard of the second stage of the one-line sky. Its true production of faith was 5 times that of an ordinary one-line sky deity statue, reaching more than 2.6 million a day. This meant that the problem of paying off the debt within 2 years had been solved. And at most 7 months, he would be able to clear off this terrible debt. Chen Guang let out a long sigh. When he turned his head to look at the statue that had no sense of beauty, he felt that it was much more pleasing to the eye. Azure, it's not that I want to criticize you, but the appearance isn't important. What's important is the inner beauty and its usefulness. My entire life is given by this deity statue. Shut up and scram. I'm annoyed when I see you. Finally, Liu Li couldn't stand this shameless fellow and charged over to give him a kick. However, Chen Guang knew when to stop and retreated. When his mind returned to the outside world, he was in a very good mood after resolving a long-standing problem. He found everything and everyone pleasing to the eye. On second thought, the new environment he was in was not bad. Take the bus he was sitting on, for example. In the old world, China's domestic buses, such as Yutong, Golden Dragon, and Asian Star, were fine to sit on. However, be it in terms of comfort or mechanical stability, overseas brands such as Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, and Toyota were far superior. It was only because they had an advantage in price that they had the upper hand in China's domestic market. However, it was different now. As early as 100 years ago, when China was still around, China's domestic industrial development had caught up. After the end of the 4-year War of Resistance, it took off. Now, no one in the world would believe that the strongest luxury bus brand was actually the wild horse under Chen Guang's buttocks. To others, the revitalization of the Chinese nation was a long process that required generations of people to persevere and fight for it. It was a great cause that required generations of people to shed blood for it and devote themselves to it until their deaths. However, to Chen Guang, he would be able to complete the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation after he woke up from his sleep. Chen Guang thought happily, "It's only because I'm thin-skinned. Otherwise, I wouldn't even know how to praise myself." In addition, he also had a lot less trouble. Before the world fusion was completed, his enemies who had placed a bounty on his head had basically ascended to heaven. Now that the worlds had fused, they had no chance of coming back to life. The people who were the most miserable were the people from the Sanshin Corporation and the Yamada Corporation. They even lost their country and became the Liaodong province of the old man's country. They probably didn't even remember this enemy of theirs. They would only wonder why important members of their families suddenly died one after another. Just thinking about it made him feel happy. In addition, the Tianguan Corporation was operating steadily. There were still some small problems with morning light environmental protection, but after Teacher Zhua applied the new photocatalyst technology, all problems would no longer exist. Strictly speaking, the current China was like the United States of America in the past. The photocatalyst technology that he had previously brought out was still 50 years ahead of the world. Now that I'm rich, I have no enemies, and I'm free. If it weren't for what those 2 players said, it's time for me to enjoy my life. Chapter 12:30. Unknowingly, the car arrived at Wujing. When he got off the car, Chen Guang looked at the 2 players without batting an eyelid, memorizing their appearances. However, he did not intend to inquire about their names. Merely 2 E-rank players were not worthy of his attention. Moreover, it seemed that players could not easily let ordinary people know their identities. Otherwise, they would be punished by the system. Although the 2 seemed bold, they were actually very cautious. Chen Guang did not know them, so he had no interest in scaring them. In addition, the barrier that the 2 used to communicate should not only block the perception of ordinary people. Other players should not have the qualifications to eavesdrop. As for why he could, Chen Guang expressed his calmness. He was not boasting or mocking. They had already said that the old man was the only S-rank player, so it was natural for him to have some special privileges. Innate level suppression was just like how low-level players in online games would see the attributes of high-level players as skulls and question marks, while high-level players would see the attributes of low-level players as clear as day. Chen Guang directly hailed a taxi and went straight to the location of the Guangdong General Office. He did not call anyone in advance and chose to go there directly. When he arrived, the building where the general office was located was still the same. There were no changes to the height and area, but the building's appearance looked more designed. Sure enough, this was the benefit of China becoming stronger. Even its architecture was world-leading. Walking into the main hall of the general office, which was disguised as a multinational company's office building, the beautiful female agent sitting at the front desk was still a familiar face. When the two female receptionists saw Chen Guang, they revealed expressions of ecstasy. They enthusiastically nodded at Chen Guang, and at the same time, they picked up the communication device and said in a tone that was close to tears of joy, "Attention, everyone! Attention, everyone! The department head is back." Chen Guang's heart skipped a beat. What? Did I hear wrongly? Department head? Although he heard that the Guangdong General Office had been promoted to a ministerial level, shouldn't his position still be that of a director? What's wrong? Why did my title change? Right? I've already retired, so my title can at most be Old Chrysanthemum, Pooey, Old Director, right? Considering the confidentiality regulations, even though he was the former leader, shouldn't he be denied entry? Shouldn't you at least ask why I'm here? What was going on with the two of them being so ecstatic? With this in mind, Chen Guang walked into the elevator with a belly full of suspicions. He then entered his fingerprint on the elevator and pressed the buttons for several floors at the same time. However, the elevator kept descending and finally stopped at the basement third floor, where the buttons did not show. The moment the elevator door opened, all the employees of the Guangdong General Headquarters, led by Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan, appeared in front of Chen Guang. As far as the eye could see, there were more than 300 people standing in the lobby of the 200-square-meter elevator. Everyone was looking at him with incomparable worship and fanaticism in their eyes, making Chen Guang's hair stand on end. I became more handsome? What the hell were they doing this for? Minister, I knew you wouldn't leave us behind so easily. The first to speak was actually Shuai Lin. He came forward excitedly and carefully looked at Chen Guang. His gaze was so attentive that it was like a fanatical painter admiring the authentic works of Da Vinci. Minister, I knew you would succeed. Now we have hope. Looking at Shuai Lin in front of him, especially the light green faith value thread that emerged from the top of his head and connected to the heavenly Holy Grail, Chen Guang could not help but be shocked. This young man was originally a fanatic, but he could actually become even more fanatical? What the hell did I say to them before? And what the hell happened? Chen Guang's heart was full of questions, but since everyone was so worshipping him, he could not reveal the truth that he had amnesia. He could only laugh and pat Shuai Lin on the shoulder. Look at how excited you are. It's just a small matter, not worth mentioning. All right, everyone can disperse. Go do what you need to do. Work is more important. Therefore, even those who did not have any talent would be able to feel it after being an official for a long time. Now that Chen Guang had used these words, it was really easy to get away with it. After everyone's emotions gradually calmed down, they saw that the minister had a serious expression and was not in the mood for small talk, so they all obediently returned to their respective offices. Of course, it was not that Chen Guang did nothing. In this short period of time, he quietly investigated the situation of everyone present. Those who were supposed to be inner strength experts still had inner strength in their bodies. Even a few of the elites who were originally transferred from the army had some signs of inner strength in their bodies. It was probably because they had been colleagues with a martial artist for a long time. Everyone had a good relationship with each other. Under the new situation, the Jianghu people were no longer as selfish as they used to be. Those who could teach them a few moves were very frank and generous. Of course, It was a little late for ordinary people to learn martial arts at the age of 20 or 30. However, the military elites who were chosen to be by his side were dragons and phoenixes among men. Their qualifications were incomparable to ordinary people. In addition, many of these people had received training from Chun Guang himself in the Shun Special Training Camp back then. It could be said that they had a good foundation. Later, they dabbled in martial arts as elderly apprentices. Although they could not achieve too high achievements, they could practice a little bit of inner strength and barely get started. Sitting in his office, Chun Guang thought about the concentrated lecture he had promised everyone in the old world. Given his personality, since he had said it, of course, he had to do it. However, since the entire world was different now, did the previous promise still count? It was not difficult for him to deliver all living beings from suffering, but he was not sure if he had said such words in the history of this new world. In addition, he was now the minister. When Shuai Lin mentioned that he would definitely succeed, she was most likely referring to the fact that he had become an S-rank player through God of Joy. However, in the hearts of his subordinates, was he a martial arts expert or a top player? Just as he was lost in his thoughts, someone knocked on his office door. "Come in." It was Xianqin who sneakily peeked her head in from outside. She carefully sized up Chun Guang's office to see if there was anyone else. Then, she flashed in and locked the office door. Looking at Xianqin, who was clearly an adult but was petite and cute, Chun Guang's heart felt a little itchy. If it were in the past, he would definitely have decisively done it first to suppress his shock. They were all adults, and what was done was done. There was no need to be reserved. However, the situation was unclear now. He could not be sure what kind of relationship he had with Xianqin in the new world. If he rashly made a move, with this little girl's personality, she would probably explode. "Hurry up. There are many people outside. Let's do something first and then talk." Chun Guang was hesitating. He did not expect that Xianqin, this little girl, would throw away her clothes as she walked and walk forward with a routine tone and gaze. Chun Guang was confused. In the setting of the new world, how did I treat this little girl in the past? Your performance makes you look like a Lolita meat toilet. This you are. In his heart, Chun Guang wondered if he had misunderstood. Could it be that she wanted to cultivate? What are you waiting for? Didn't you practice the true martial arts double cultivation and have to do it every month? I have calculated the time. It has been almost 30 days since you went into seclusion. Do you want to go crazy? Seeing that Chun Guang was dilly-dallying, Xianqin actually started to blame him. Chun Guang suddenly understood. So that's how it is. Is the old man so shameless in the new setting? How could such a stupid, true martial arts double cultivation be made up to deceive people? Besides, how am I hiding from the world? Aren't I staying well in my hometown? I thought you were going to find a mountain to live in seclusion. I didn't expect you to go back to your hometown to comprehend the great Tao with your family. When Master was alive, he once said that a true expert should first enter the world, then come out, and then enter the world. I didn't understand it before, but now I understand. Hey, hurry up. I know you don't have a lover in your hometown. Huh? Don't tell me you're tired of me already. Do you want me to call Xiao Meow Meow over? Xianqin said and twisted her delicate body on Chun Guang's body with great dissatisfaction. Chun Guang thought silently. How could I be tired of you? It's just that you came too directly and abruptly, so I couldn't react. Chapter 12:31. It's nothing. Come on, come on. Xianqin sat up straight and looked straight at him. You seem to be perfunctory? Not interested? Chun Guang quickly waved his hand. How can that be? Do you think I'm too small? That I'm too thin? That I don't have any meat on me? Chun Guang looked down at her. Although he didn't want to admit it, although he did know that she was an adult, he really felt guilty. In his memory, the first time he had sex with Xianqin was when they were in the slaughtering world on Mount Baylor. There were many coincidences at that time. He wasn't such an immoral person at all. Although he had fantasized about it when he first met her, he didn't really take the initiative to put it into practice. How could I? Absolutely not. Your figure is very, very okay. Then hurry up. Okay. After a long time, Chen Guang looked at the computer in front of him in a daze. Enchanting had already packed up and went out. She stayed in the office of the ministry minister for more than 2 hours. As long as the employees outside had an IQ of more than 60, they would know what the two were doing inside. However, no one had any interest in gossiping. Instead, they were used to it and didn't find it strange. It was an open secret in the ministry that the minister and the deputy minister were having an affair. Not only was no one dissatisfied with this unspoken rule in the workplace, but many female comrades in the ministry were envious of the deputy minister's treatment. Unfortunately, the minister was too picky. If there was a chance, they would also like to try the feeling of dual cultivation with the minister. He was the most powerful martial artist in history, born with an innate body with 8 extra meridians unblocked, and his legendary Jinwu and Jinwu double cultivation could even help people open up the conception and governing vessels. He was simply a walking walk, okay? Not to mention others. Even another deputy minister often complained in private that the minister favored one and discriminated against the other. He was unwilling to help the common people and would rather let ordinary women who didn't practice martial arts take advantage of them than to generously help those in the pugilistic world who really needed it. The so-called children of the pugilistic world, in ancient times, paid particular attention to quick revenge. In the more open modern society, of course, they would not restrain themselves. Instead, they would be even more indulgent. However, most of the female heroes of Jianghu were too arrogant. Although they had many fellow disciples, it was very difficult for them to enter the eyes of those beautiful female martial sisters who were regarded as the pearl in the palm of each sect. The minister had appeared out of nowhere half a year ago and unified the Jianghu with his unparalleled might. He wiped out the evil sects and killed hundreds of the evil sects in one night. He even killed the mastermind, Ouyang Tianxing, at the peak of Heaven Mountain. At that time, the minister's peerless heroism was deeply rooted in people's hearts, and he became the dream lover of countless female disciples in the Jianghu. Of course, everyone knew that the minister's vision was extremely high. Although ordinary people were eager to try, in front of so many strong competitors, they could only hide their thoughts. Only those who were ranked at the top in terms of appearance among the major sects would have the courage to express their love for the minister. It should be known that when the sects in the Jianghu chose their successors, they usually chose children with outstanding innate talent. Their innate talent was there. When they grew up, even if their looks were ordinary in the sect, they would still be above average when compared to ordinary people. Those female heroes who were ranked at the top in the Jianghu for their beauty were even more top-notch beauties in the outside world. They were the kind that could appear on television without any makeup. It was just like when Enchanting first appeared before Qingguang. Her appearance was so exquisite that it was like a porcelain doll had fallen from the sky. She had shocked old master Yin Kongwang for a long time. In terms of cuteness, there might not be many female heroes in the department who could compare to Enchanting. However, if there was a beauty pageant and they were to be voted, there were quite a few who could compete with Enchanting and Wu Miaowan. Alas, the minister was indeed the strongest in history. He was quite firm. Faced with everyone throwing themselves at him, he maintained a certain level of rationality and explicitly forbade such behavior. Up until now, Deputy Minister Xian was the only one who broke the minister's wall. The others could only sigh in regret. Of course, the thing that really established Qingguang's prestige was not just his looks. After suppressing the evil sects, the chaos of the martial artists caused the people in power to panic. The martial artists of the Jianghu were about to break into a great war with the people in power. When a catastrophe was inevitable, the minister did not hesitate to sacrifice his precious body and personally dealt with 2 old men from the core class of the people in power, resolving the crisis invisibly. It was rumored that he had sacrificed a lot in this matter. He did not even hesitate to use the honey trap. Not only did this news not damage his image, it even made him more respected. What kind of emotion and courage did this require? In short, after this series of very nonsensical facts, Chun Guang's reputation in the Heaven Division was now extremely high. Most of it was due to his personal strength, and the other half was due to his charm. Now, what troubled Chun Guang the most was that the Guangding General Office was gone. It had become the inexplicable Heaven Division. On the surface, the Heaven Division was just another name for the Guangding General Office, but things were obviously not that simple. Fortunately, the computer in his office had extremely high security clearance. He could look up any information at any time. He pulled out the top secret information one by one and browsed through it at an extremely fast speed. The Heaven Division had been established for a long time, but it was not called that before. It was called the Special Affairs Bureau. The former minister of the Special Affairs Bureau was the evil sect's leader, Ouyang Tianqing. After Chun Guang had personally destroyed the evil sect and Ouyang Tianqing, he had personally acted as a bridge between the martial artists and the people in power, eliminating the potential conflict between the martial artists and the people in power, and allowing both sides to truly open their hearts and work together. In the end, under the conditions of mutual agreement, the Special Affairs Bureau was reorganized and the Heaven Division was born half a year ago. Chun Guang became the minister and had been in charge ever since. The initial purpose of the Heaven Division was to provide a place for the martial artists in the world to settle down. At the same time, it was to give them an identity so that the martial artists could regain the identity of ordinary people. This would prevent the evil sect, led by Ouyang Tianqing, from causing trouble. At the same time, it would satisfy the needs of the martial artists to move from the dark to the light and reintegrate into the new era after the rapid development of technology. Technology was advancing, but the martial artist skills were mostly inherited from their ancestors. If not for the birth of Chun Guang, the martial artist abilities would have regressed. After reintegrating into society, the major sects could also make use of their strengths and run their own businesses. Whether it was their financial resources or their ability to allocate resources, they were significantly better than before. In order to express their goodwill to the inner force martial artists, the people in power could not help but take care of those who were willing to follow the rules and integrate into society through the power of their sections. Big aristocratic families like the Wen family, which had a lot of history, developed even faster after receiving support. The other small families were doing well too. At least their businesses were doing well. Of course, the martial arts sects that joined the Heaven Division also returned the favor. They sent many of their disciples into the real world to help the Huaxia government solve the problems that ordinary elites could not handle. However, the peace did not last long. About 2 months ago, after a Huaxia scientist captured the God's particle, some special situations that were beyond the common sense of ordinary people but could be explained by modern physics appeared. That's right, the game appeared. Ordinary people did not know about it, but players from all over the world appeared like mushrooms after the rain. There was no sign that an ordinary person would become a player, but the game still had a clear preference when it came to selecting players. Most of the people who were selected were people who had special talents in certain areas. They were either mentally strong in self-training, talented in physical fitness, exceptionally smart, or had high emotional intelligence. In reality, these people were either successful in their careers or had great potential. Even if they looked like ordinary white-collar workers or office workers at the moment, their potential was quite amazing. After ordinary people became players, they would be summoned into the game periodically to undergo various tests. During the completion of the mission or at the end of the mission, they would be rewarded with points that could be used to strengthen their abilities in the game. In addition, every time a player was summoned into the game, their appearance would be reset. Other than the S-rank player Chun Guang, who had voluntarily revealed his identity, no one in the world knew who the other players were. Only players who had signed a contract with each other and communicated with each other in real life could know each other's true identity. Due to the natural territorial nature of humans, players from all over the world quickly formed different large forces in addition to small teams and individual combat modes. Almost all the members of the Heaven Division were awakened. Even without signing a team contract, they naturally became the top team of the Huaxia players. However, in order to eliminate the small number of unawakened members, the Heaven Division also paid a heavy price. 2 awakened ones risked unknown dangers and exposed their identities in public. In the end, they were reset by the game on the spot and lost their identity as players. After that, the ordinary people who were picked out were transferred. Now, the ones who remained here were all genuine players. As for why Changguang chose to go into seclusion, it was because of the opposing forces of the human players in the game. The Protoss. Chapter 1232. From the day the game was born, it was the beginning of the competition for resources between the Earthlings and the Protoss. The so-called resources referred to the completion rate of the quest. Each player's contribution in the quest would determine the number of points they would receive in the end. With the exception of a few absolute dragons among men, almost all the human players started at level. Faced with the Protoss players who were at least level C at the start of the game, the human players were completely suppressed in the corner of the wall, shivering in fear. Every time they entered the game mission, in addition to fighting against the various dangers in the game, the human players also had to guard against the Protoss players. Whether they could survive in the game and make a name for themselves depended not only on themselves, but also on the Protoss players to be merciful and not slaughter the human race. In addition, compared to the scattered human players at the beginning, the Protoss players were stronger and more disciplined. Human players needed to exchange for and sign a team contract before they could form a team. The more members there were in a team, the higher the level of the contract needed and the more reward points needed to exchange for it. So far, the largest human team only had 4 people. Even a large force like the Heaven might not be able to enter the same mission space, even if they agreed on a secret code outside. It was also difficult to form a temporary team inside. In addition, the Heavens Division, with Aunt May and a few other seniors as the core, managed to form a few sharp knife teams, but the number of people could not exceed 4. However, this was also because the seniors had a high starting point. After breaking through the peak of Pyjin, masters like Aunt May started out as level D players in the game, which was a little easier than ordinary people. In sharp contrast to the human players, the Protoss players acted in a team mode from the beginning. Every time they arrived in a mission space, they could always find other Protoss players as quickly as possible and quickly form a team. Take Yu Ting's team, for example. In addition to Yu Ting, who was suspected to be in level S powerhouse, there were also several level A players, including the Witch Wethany and many more level B and level C players. In the face of such an overwhelming team advantage, the human players had no power to resist at all. They could only struggle at death's door. The Protoss players were extremely domineering in the game. If they disobeyed them, they would kill the humans. Sometimes, even a simple encounter during a mission would cause the humans to be killed. Or, even if they were in a bad mood, they would slaughter humans as they pleased. In the eyes of the Protoss, although humans had the same or similar appearance, they did not treat humans as their own kind. It had been 2 months since the game was created, and the experienced or relatively unlucky players had only experienced 5 quests at most. However, most of them did not get much improvement. Just struggling to survive is already very difficult. As for getting more reward points in the quest to enhance their strength, this is too difficult. Obviously, if the human players couldn't think of a way to change the current situation, as time passed, the Protoss would gain an overwhelming advantage, and the humans would have no chance of turning the tables. No one knew why the Protoss cared so much about mission completion and reward points, so much so that they always spared no effort to weaken their competitors, even if they looked weak. No one knew what the game was for, what would happen if they lost, and what would happen if they won. No one even knew what the purpose of the game was, but every player intuitively realized that they had to find a way to reverse the situation. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. No one knew what the consequences would be, but they were sure that it would not be good. As for the scientist who discovered the God's particle and caused the game, he was inexplicably crazy. No one knew the reason. What had already happened, and humans could only adapt to this sudden change as quickly as possible. When things were already beyond repair, the people of Earth showed an extraordinary ability to adapt, and they survive in the game with incredible efficiency. Of course, the chosen ones who could not adapt were eliminated and reset as quickly as possible. Those who could survive in the game had no choice. As for the ordinary people who were not chosen, they had no such worries at all. Anyway, they still ate and drank. The sun rose as usual, and the moon was still waxing and waning. Nothing would change. At best, they would only find that someone around them who was already outstanding suddenly became even more outstanding. They stood out in all aspects of life and work, whether it was in terms of workability or personal temperament. There was an explosive growth trend. In fact, it was these people who became players by chance. Although the reward points obtained in the game could not be directly exchanged for benefits in reality, the physical strengthening of the players in the mission and the training of the mind could be perfectly inherited in real life. No one was born a genius or a success. The hardships experienced in the game made players more mature, their thinking became more agile, and they did things more resolutely. When a person with extraordinary talent became impeccable in terms of temperament, success, in reality, naturally came naturally. People who were curious would take the initiative to ask them, such as, "How did you do it?" and so on. These people would often come up with all sorts of reasons, such as being well-prepared, being suddenly enlightened, getting to know a great person, and so on. In short, they would never mention anything about the game to non-players, or they would be reset. In fact, no one knew that although these people were powerful in real life, in the game, they were simply trembling with fear, treading on thin ice, and living worse than a wild dog hiding in a tree hole. As for the reset that made the players change their expressions, it was the same as Chun Guang's initial guess. It was completely deleted and became a player's memory during this period of time, and then it was replaced by a fictional memory. According to the concept of ordinary people, if a person's memory was tampered with, it was equivalent to becoming a different person. Of course, no one wanted this. At this time, only Chun Guang knew, "Friends, you are really thinking too much. You have become a different person from the beginning." As for Chun Guang's so-called closed-door training, the so-called breakthrough, it was because he, the Minister of Heaven, had stood up when the humans were completely at a disadvantage in this game. When he announced that he would go into closed-door training alone, he, as the Minister of Heaven, had broken through to the peak of B level at the fastest speed among all the players. However, he still could not compete with the Protoss. Before he left, he had declared to the many members of Heaven that he would not return until he became an A-level player. In the end, what appeared in front of the world was high. My God! In the movie, he had used the most direct method to announce to all the players in the world that he had consecutively jumped 2 levels, becoming an S-level player above a level. Although the average strength of the humans was still not a match for the Protoss, at least with him around, the peak strength of the humans was comparable to the Protoss. In the hearts of others, this action of his was equivalent to blowing the horn of counterattack. So, when they saw him return, how could the members of Heaven not be ecstatic? Silently turning off the computer in front of him, Chun Guang let out a sigh. After spending an entire day, he had finally seen through the huge pile of top-secret information in front of him. Thanks to his powerful intelligence network, the information also summarized the types and levels of abilities of many members of Heaven and ordinary players who had come into contact with the outside world. There was also some statistical information on the Protoss. However, the most important point of all the information was the records of his personal actions. Chun Guang silently wiped away his sweat. This fictional history really gave him a high-end idea. Am I so great? Does it mean that I forcefully carried the hope of the entire human race? A walking, living, visible, and touchable savior that should only appear in Hollywood blockbusters? No wonder the power of faith coming from all directions was so strong. Now, every player must have regarded me as their guiding light. I feel that there is a need to continue promoting the true martial dual cultivation to the outside world. I must gather the virgin blood of 72 beautiful female players. Cough, cough. Although he knew that doing this might really be able to trick the fanatical fans of the players into throwing themselves at him, Chen Guang was not that thick-skinned. After leaving the Heaven Building, Chen Guang drove alone to the headquarters of the Tianguan Group. He felt lucky that his family members did not have any abnormal reactions after reading the God of Joy. There was not a single player among them. This does not seem to be something to be proud of. This only means that the people of the Chen family are all mediocre. Forget it, they are all following me anyway. It doesn't matter if they have it or not. Speaking of which, according to the criteria of selecting players in the game, there were a few candidates in Chen Guang's mind. Almost all of them were players. But why haven't any of them called until now? Is it because everyone knows that I am in seclusion? Then the news of my return to heaven should have spread. They should have some sort of response, right? Just when Chen Guang was thinking about this, his phone suddenly rang. Lowering his head to take a look, he grinned. As expected, I knew it was you, little Lin. Chen Guang answered the phone. From the other side came Lin Jingwei's voice. He sounded slightly tired. Brother Guang, you are finally out of seclusion. Of course, Earth is still waiting for me to save it. We really didn't expect that. When are you coming back to school? Chen Guang pondered over Lin Jingwei's choice of words and thought, we? Could it be that Bai Nyangzi and Xiong'er were also players? Forget about Xiong. After all, he was born with the back of a tiger and the waist of a bear. When it came to martial arts, perhaps Xiong'er could not be compared to Chen Guang, but he was definitely not someone who could be compared to just anyone. But what about Bai Nyangzi? Just based on his incomparably poisonous ability to write deceitful web novels? That's right. Bai Nyangzi's awakening ability must be like this. With a swoosh, he would throw a book at someone's face. Then, the book would expand with the wind and float above the person's head. Large gilded words would fall like raindrops. After hitting the person's head, all sorts of negative buffs would be cast. Stamina -2, IQ -2, EQ -10, mood -100. Chapter 1233. Thinking about it this way, it seemed like he was quite powerful. The legendary negative buff super support. Thinking about it this way, it seemed like Bai Nyangzi's ability was very powerful. Forget it. I'll find out when I see them later. Thinking about it now is just a waste of time. When Chen Guang arrived at the Tianguan Group, it was already past 11 at night. There were not many people in the headquarters except for a few small fish and shrimp on duty. Seeing him return, the few employees on night duty were first shocked, then their faces lit up. Boss, why are you back at this time? Do you want us to inform the other bosses? One of the administrative employees asked. Chen Guang shook his head. Forget it, it's too late now. Let's talk about it tomorrow. I'll go to my office and rest for a while. Chen Guang waved and turned to walk 2 steps before turning back, as if he had thought of something. Oh, right, in the company. Is there anything unusual recently? The administrative employee looked confused. He scratched his head and thought for a while before saying, something strange happened. Last month, a few people resigned together as if they had agreed on it, but what? Chen Guang could not help but ask when he saw that he wanted to say something. Now that the company had grown in size, the number of employees had also increased. Now, the total number of employees had unknowingly exceeded 300. People coming and going were common, so there was no need to make a fuss about resignations and new employees. As long as it was not the core backbone, it was not strange for lower-level employees or even middle-level employees to resign. Just like some people whose hometown was elsewhere chose to work at the Tianguan Group after graduation. Although the pay was good, it was inevitable that they would be homesick as a guest in a foreign land. Or they might have a wife who was not from the country, or their husband might be returning to Shanghai. Everyone had countless reasons to choose to leave. The employee thought for a while and said, but in the past few days, most of the people who left previously have expressed that they want to return to work in the company. I don't know what they are thinking. Oh, right. The company clearly has no plans to recruit people recently, but suddenly a lot of people have come up with ways to work in the company. Many of them don't even want a salary. At this moment, Chen Guang came to a realization. Most of the people that left were players. As for those who wanted to join the Tianguang group without a salary, there was no need to mention them. They were all newbie players who wanted to ride on his coattails. In Chen Guang's previous memory, ever since the world changed, he had been in charge of the Heavenly Ministry for a long time. He didn't care much about the Tianguang group. It seemed like the employees who became players at the beginning didn't know what was going on with him. They probably wanted to take a break from work and spend more energy on the game, so they chose to resign. However, they did not expect Chen Guang to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. His boss was truly worthy of being the most talented genius in the world. He had actually become an S-class expert and had even announced his identity to the outside world. Before this, there were indeed countless people who had speculated that if people with extraordinary talents would be selected by the game to become players, then there was no reason for almighty Superman Chen Guang, a super genius who could be #1 in the world and #1 in history, to be an undiscovered gem in the vast sea. However, there was no one in the game who could completely suppress everyone else's talent. After the game came, Chen Guang himself was too low-key. Many players could not help but think that perhaps Almighty Bro had displayed too much talent before, causing him to drop the ball at the crucial moment when the game was selecting players. He might not have become a player. It was with this thought that a few players in the Tianguang group chose to resign, planning to find a way to survive on their own. Of course, it was not that no one had placed their hopes on him. In a history that never happened, the players among the fanatical fans of Almighty Superman had extraordinary confidence in him. They believed that he would definitely stand up and save the day. No one could understand how excited these players and fans were when they saw God of Joy. It was like when the world was dark and life was about to lose all hope, someone had suddenly parted the dark clouds for them, allowing the sun to shine down from the sky. Now, that Chen Guang had staged a return of the king. As long as these employees were still sane, they would all want to return to the company. It was reasonable for other casual players to want to join the company. Although being a solo straggler was free and unfettered, the encounters in the game had long since erased the arrogance of these prideful people. So what if they were capable? So what if they were talented? So what if they had great potential? Anyway, they would encounter the Protoss as soon as they entered the game. Even the weakest Protoss was a C-class player. Their attributes, skills, and combat power could be said to be overwhelming. Anyone would lose their drive. Joining the Tianguang group would mean being under the wing of humanity's only S-class player. Faced with such a temptation, anyone would be tempted. It's okay, I understand. Have they all joined the company? Not yet. Chairman, you said that the company isn't a market where you can come and go as you please. This matter will have to wait for you to come back and make a decision. Old you is right. It should be like this. You go ahead, I'm going to rest. Chen Guang nodded, waved his hand, and returned to his office. If one were to look at it from the perspective of a normal company, Yu Hong's thinking would be that of an administrative department head. Could it be that old Yu had not awakened? Logically speaking, this was not possible, right? Chen Guang prided himself on having a pair of discerning eyes. Putting aside the other people in the company, the 4 great generals were definitely talented people. If the others could become players, there was no reason for Yu Hong to be left behind. Then, could this be a judgment made by Yu Hong as a player? Thinking of this, Chen Guang was a little puzzled. Shouldn't the more players in the company, the better? Forget it. I'll find out when I see the 4 of them tomorrow. Collecting his thoughts, Chen Guang turned on his computer and logged into his top-secret account as the Minister of Heaven to look up information. When he logged into his account outside, the security level was slightly lower than in heaven. There was less information available, and the highest level of top-secret files were missing. But this was not important because there was only one item in the top-secret file, which was information related to him, the minister. From social relations to whereabouts, it was all there was. To this, Chen Guang could only shrug his shoulders, indicating that he was calm. How could he not know where he was? Heaven had hundreds of members, and the many sects that joined Heaven had more than 100,000 members. Although these people did not have the qualifications to come to the headquarters, nor did they have the qualifications to listen to Chen Guang's lectures, they were still on the heavens list. The various sects also required the disciples and workers to report any information they gathered. They were not allowed to keep anything to themselves. The range of information was also very wide. This included who or what people or protoss you met in this game mission, what you said, what you did, what abilities the other party displayed, whether you were in a team, whether you formed a temporary team or a contracted team, and so on. Everything was available. Based on this information, Heaven organized and analyzed a lot of useful information. At the moment, there were more than 500,000 human players on the list, but this was definitely a small number. It should be known that among them, just the Heaven and its outer members numbered close to 100,000. In addition, according to the information, it was not only China that had the Heaven. Other countries around the world also had similar official organizations, and they all represented the power of the country. The scale and number of people of these organizations might not be as large as Heaven, but their strength was not to be underestimated. There were close to 7 billion people in the world. Which family did not have a few geniuses? But even if there were so many organizations around the world, people with families were still the minority. Most people were still in the wild. These wild forces were extremely scattered, but their numbers were the largest. They were spread all over the world in small teams, individual experts, and so on. For example, the 2 E-level rookies that Chen Guang met on the bus should be classified as wild players. Although these wild players were the ones who suffered the most losses and performed the worst in every mission, it was hard to guarantee that there would not be some amazing experts among them. For example, another top expert, 1-1, who was placed high hopes on by the people of the pugilistic world, had now become a wild player. No one knew where 1-1 had gone. Ever since the start of the game, there had been no news from her. Her whereabouts were uncertain, and even the Wen family could not contact her. But without a doubt, with 1-1's ability, as long as she was not unlucky enough to bump into the muzzle of the Protoss from the very beginning, her growth rate would definitely be much faster than the top team leaders of the Guangding General Headquarters. It was even possible that she had the strength of a C-level right from the start. Other than the large official organizations and wild forces, the information also showed the existence of another very mysterious organization. It was somewhat similar to a religion, but also different. This group of people was considered to be potential members of a religious organization. Although these people did not seem to have organized themselves in a systematic way, according to the analysis of the intelligence personnel of Heaven, as time passed, they would come together sooner or later. This was because these people all had very obvious common characteristics. Their awakened abilities seemed to be of the same origin, and there were great similarities. This was obviously not normal. Everyone might be good at similar things, but the probability of them clashing was too high, so high that it was very strange. So far, Heaven had collected more than 500,000 players' information and conducted a unified summary analysis. Among them, there were 10 types of players' abilities that were suspected of clashing. For example, racing, it was not just cars. In any case, these people's awakened abilities could not be separated from the things that run on land. If they were fighting alone, they might try to get a vehicle from the beginning of the mission. Then, even if they didn't do anything, they could just drive around, run, and hide from people. They could often muddle through until the end of the mission. Even if they didn't get anything, at least they wouldn't die. If they were lucky enough to form a team with others, then it would be amazing. They were simply natural vehicle drivers in the various large teams. If everyone could gather their reward points to exchange for a powerful vehicle, they would be able to bring an entire team to gallop on the battlefield. Their survival rate was extremely high. In addition, there were more than 1,000 people whose abilities were piano. The awakened abilities of these pianists were also not trivial. Even if they were only E-level pianists, as long as they were given a good piano, they could greatly weaken the enemy's strength on the battlefield or increase the combat strength of their own teammates. According to the current statistics, If an E-level pianist played a Steinway piano on a truck controlled by an E-level driver, he could even radiate and restrict the abilities of dozens of D-level players at the same time. There was also a type of player. They were real players who could summon the abilities of a character in a game called Dota in the game. There were also pilots, but these people were very miserable. The reward points needed to exchange for a flying vehicle were too high. There were also microsculptors. There were also dart players. These people were powerful and could often become the main long-range attack force of various teams. There were also some people who had exaggerated arm strength and were called Chilean arms. There were also some people who were particularly good at communicating with people. They could even communicate with small animals in the mission space to obtain information and so on. There were also some people who were particularly good at acting. When they could not get along in the game, they could stand in the corner and act like an exhaust pipe. If someone walked past them, they would not be able to recognize them. The most powerful of these people were the type of people who did not have obvious awakened abilities. However, their physical bodies in the game were extremely tyrannical. Even if they were only E-level, they could withstand several attacks from a C-level Protoss and not die. In short, these suspected ability users covered a wide range of areas. They even overlapped with the members of Heaven. The total number of these people added up to more than 100,000 people. The management of Heaven's intelligence agency gathered these overlapping ability users and asked them how they did it. They were all at a loss. But now, Chen Guang revealed the answer. Damn, isn't this the ability of the old man's 11 statues? In other words, these people might not have been selected to become players, or they might have awakened other abilities. However, because they worshipped the old man's abilities in certain areas, when they were selected to become players, they were tacitly chosen to be the target audience of the old man's statues. I don't know what's going on, but this is very much like a cult. Yeah, don't I have 11 statues? Why are there only 10 abilities radiated out? Oh damn, luckily my pile driver was not trained in the real world. Otherwise, I don't know how many people I would have killed. Speaking of which, in this game system, the performance of the world's 4 major religions was not very good. There was actually no organized formation of players. In fact, they were not even as good as the old man statues. Forget it, this is not important. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.